TWSB, Chapter 41. Palace Escape Number 1. The carriage shook gently as it moved. Gunnell's voice was shaking as well. I've committed a grave sin, Your Highness. Please forgive me. It's okay, Gunnell. People sometimes forget things when they are busy. Still, I mean it. I'm totally fine. I smiled and consoled Gunnell. The young boy's extremely depressed golden eyes finally lit up a bit. I thought that he might continue begging for forgiveness, so I quickly put 3 macarons in his hand. Benjamin sighed after having watched our interaction. I had run into Imperial Prince Cedric, who got off from the carriage next to mine, as I waited for Demi in the garden earlier. The bastard was talking as if I was the reason the trip was delayed. That was when I learned that the Imperial Prince was traveling with me. No wonder there were 10 carriages there. No wonder the vice-captain of the Imperial Guard was going with us. Many pieces finally fell into place. Damn it, I was shocked after seeing the unexpected face, but to be honest, things like that didn't shock me much anymore. What could a diplomatic hostage say or do when His Royal Highness decides that he wants to save money and observe the life of his people? I definitely meant to inform you that His Royal Highness would be traveling with us, but my mind was scattered yesterday. Gunnell's voice became quiet. I recalled when the young boy came with Vice-Captain Elizabeth to see me yesterday. If I remember correctly, Gunnell was. Yeah, I know. You were so busy looking at Demi that you didn't even finish your juice. I calmly commented. Gunnell's face blanked out for a moment before he vigorously nodded his head after missing a beat. Demi is seriously cute after all. I don't know for sure, but it seemed as if Vice-Captain Elizabeth didn't tell me about the Imperial Prince on purpose to surprise me. We're on different carriages and it's not like my schedule changes because of His Royal Highness. It doesn't matter. I smiled while speaking the truth. Gunnell's complexion looked much better as he handed me a hot off-the-press copy of Less Than Bi-Weekly Register Greater Than that was released this morning. The cover had the phrase, Belliard asks and Venetian answers in large text. Lady Sarah Belliard's interview with me seemed to be the main article. I felt extremely embarrassed despite hearing about it in advance. The story about the prize for the great clearance of demonic beasts is here too. I did my best to avoid the title and talked about something listed in small letters at the bottom of the cover. The great clearance of demonic beasts and the sword of wisdom from the flaming star, the divine item wants a master. It sounded dramatic. The article that could not be published in the last issue on the 15th was finally out after receiving Her Majesty's approval. I started thinking about the Imperial Prince in the carriage in front of mine. It might be easy for him to win since he is said to be the most skilled with weapons in the Empire, but I had no idea how he planned to pull the Sword of Wisdom out. Will he dig out the entire area around it? Your Highness, this should be your first time in this direction. Benjamin gently started talking to me. My gaze followed his hand to look out the window. The carriage was passing the building next to the Empress Palace. My jaws dropped on their own. Wow, everything's big here. The 2 attendants quietly chuckled at my gasp of admiration. There were already so many things I had yet to see, despite not even having left the Imperial Palace yet. Most of the palaces I've visited were located at the rear of the Imperial Palace, giving me no reason to come this far to the front. I might be exaggerating a bit, but there was a fountain as large as Juliet Palace and a garden that seemed at least 3 times the size of the Empress Palace. There were also numerous palaces that looked extremely luxurious even though I have no idea what they were used for. There was also a statue of Empress Frederick's mother, the late Empress Celine, which was at least 5 meters tall. We are now passing through the main gate. Benjamin continued his explanation. We had already made it to the main gate while I was blanking out at the marvelous view. Exiting the Imperial Palace shouldn't be a big deal, but I couldn't help but be nervous. The carriage seemed to slow down for a bit before I faintly heard the horse's hooves hitting the ground as the carriage pushed forward once more. My forehead was up against the window as I observed the outside. The tall black gate was opened wide. Knights in silver armor were kneeling on one knee along our sides as we passed by. They were showing respect to the Imperial Prince as he left. That's kind of cool. Demi, look over there. I called for the red panda that was spread out like jelly on top of my knees. He seemed to be sleepy after having played in the garden, as he didn't respond much. I gently caressed Demi's back while taking in the world outside the imperial palace that was slowly appearing in front of my eyes. Seriously, there are so many people. You've already said that 4 times, Your Highness. Gunnell laughed out loud as he responded. I had been starting my sentences with, seriously, you know, and, for real, for a while now. Seeing a new part of the imperial palace was enough to wow me, but the imperial capital, the city outside the imperial palace, was truly a new world. There were nobles wearing fancy outfits and commoners wearing simple clothes walking around in the same place. The clean streets had vendors selling street food and flowers. The houses looked like they came straight out of fairy tales as they were all sorts of shapes and colors. Generally, the people looked happy but busy. It seemed fitting for the imperial capital that was said to have 10% of the empire's population. Your Highness, please be wary of your facial expressions as they may be able to see you from the outside. I quickly moved away from the window after hearing Benjamin's advice. The large number of people outside were all bowing toward our carriage procession. It wouldn't be weird if at least one person raised their heads, but nobody was moving. The people looking out of building windows either took off their hats or bowed their heads to show their respect. It gave me the chills. The people of the Empire have so much respect for the imperial family. If you are surprised by this, just wait until later, Your Highness. Benjamin smiled as he gave a benign answer. He seemed to enjoy the fact that I was being surprised left and right. We are almost at the Ligo portal, Your Highness. Gunnell offered me the portal motion sickness medicine. I put the Marquis d'Uam brand motion sickness medicine underneath my ear and waited for the carriage to slow down. The Ligo district, which was at the center of the imperial capital as well as the largest district, had so many people that it was one of the first places in the empire to get a portal. The plan was to use the Ligo portal to travel to the southern part of the imperial capital and take carriages from there. I believe that we have arrived. Already. It is because the roads were cleared for His Royal Highness. Is that it? Is it similar to how the light is always green and the Guangwaman is clear whenever the president is headed out? Guangwaman is the main and largest gate of Gyeongbokgung Palace, in Jongno-gu, Seoul, South Korea. Your Highness, people may try to talk to you once you get off the carriage. You don't need to respond to all of them. I heard that His Royal Highness does not say anything at all. That bastard is always like that. I barely held myself back from saying that out loud and simply smiled. People were still bowing extremely respectfully as our carriages passed. The imperial carriages soon stopped in a single file line outside a sparkling building. It wasn't as luxurious as the imperial palace, but I could tell that it was a not building where just anybody could enter. Knock knock. The coachman knocked on the door before soon opening it. I checked my outfit one last time. I also didn't forget to ask Gunnell and Benjamin if there were any marks on my forehead from pushing up against the window earlier. I didn't like crowded places or having a lot of people looking at me, but it was time for me to get off. I'll start with the conclusion. The Ligo Central Commerce Center was similar to the Korean COEX Convention and Exhibition Center located in Samsungdong of Gangnam-gu District, Seoul, is one of South Korea's convention and exhibition centers. I worked very hard not to look scared. Demi was still sleeping in my arms without a care in the world. I was jealous of him. Your Highness, please only look forward as you walk. I will, Benjamin. The entire building was full of different shops, and the path was as complicated as a maze. The lobby was connected to the portal entrance, so the building would be full of spectators whenever celebrities came by. It really was the same as COEX. For example, our current situation. Long live His Royal Highness. We greet His Royal Highness, Imperial Prince Cedric, the future son of the Empire. 3 cheers for His Royal Highness. Please be victorious. This was the first time since my transmigration that I was happy to have Imperial Prince Cedric with me. He's so popular. Yes, His Royal Highness has gone out many times to clear demonic beasts. Gunnell was like a ghost, hearing my quiet mumbling before he responded. I nodded my head without making it seem obvious before peeking toward the Imperial Prince who was walking in front of me. Vice Captain Elizabeth was clearing the way next to him, without her usual smile on her face. The Imperial Guard members were creating a barrier between the people and us. The people, who were split like the Red Sea, were packed like sardines in the Commerce Center lobby going wild. I was able to avoid the spotlight for a bit thanks to the overwhelming attention on the Imperial Prince. Your Royal Highness, I can die without any regrets now. I saw many women tearing up while looking at him as well. I wondered what was making them so emotional, but it was understandable considering the Imperial Prince's face. There were people placing flowers by his feet as well. The vendors selling flowers on the streets must have been aiming for this. An ad celebrating His Royal Highness's birthday goes up in the waiting room every year. I questioned my ears and thought I misheard because I was paying too much attention to everything else. Although he does not have much activities outside, His Royal Highness is loved very much. Gunnell explained with excitement. I couldn't help but ask because I was anxious. Is this a modern fantasy genre? Well, do they put something like, "You are our star"? Come on, Your Highness. How would they dare to put something like that? The miracle of August 13th, His Royal Highness is our star. That is what they put. My facial muscles were no longer listening to me. I didn't know whether to be more shocked about the TMI pouring in or that a birthday advertisement suddenly popped up in a classical romfan. This really is coex. Thank you for your mercy, Prince Jesse. I heard a man's voice at that moment. I turned toward the source of the noise out of reflex. A middle-aged man, who seemed to have worn the best clothes he owns, was tearing up while looking at me. It was difficult to ignore someone like that. Mister, what do you mean by mercy? I walked near him and asked. The whispers nearby spread like a crashing wave. I smiled bitterly after sensing the gazes cautiously looking at my eyes. I could hear the whispers about how they really were purple. I heard that you sent a large sum of money to Baron Bellang, Your Highness. Many good things happened in our territory thanks to your generosity. We started construction on a canal and the territory Lord Nim is also building a large orphanage. It is all thanks to your benevolence, Your Highness. The man quickly answered with a grateful look on his face. It was hard to understand because his voice was shaky, but he was talking about how I sent money to the parents of the dead twins. He must be a resident of Baron Bellang's territory. No, that is the benevolence of the Baron couple. I simply helped them with the funeral fees. The man bowed deeply after my comment. Please eternally receive the blessing of the Almighty God. Thank you very much. Please get home safely. I said goodbye to him and started walking again. I looked forward to see that the Imperial Prince was silently observing me after having quickly cut through the lobby to arrive in front of the portal. Of course he moved quickly, since he ignored all these people who had been waiting since dawn to say something to him. His gaze seemed to be implying that I was slowing things down again. I'm coming. I mumbled to myself. Trying to walk briskly without looking deliberately rushed made me feel as if my arms and legs would move awkwardly. I finally realized that about a third of the flowers on the ground were purple. I looked around, thinking it was not likely, and noticed that there were passionate gazes directed at me. I felt my ears instantly get hot. Wow, it probably would have been better not to know. I will open the door now, Your Royal Highness. I awkwardly walked up to the portal entrance and a person who looked like an employee respectfully guided me. The Imperial Prince flicked his chin once to respond. CRRRRR. The large copper door slowly opened to both sides. Nobody had used the portal all morning, as per the Imperial decree. The empty area was similar to the underground portal of the Empress Palace in many ways. The room was round and there was a fancy magic formation on the ground. You're finally here. Hello Your Royal Highness and Prince Jesse. Christelle de Sarnez was already in there with a whip in her hand. TWSB, Chapter 42, Palace Escape Number 1, 2, CRRRRR. The heavy door closed again once everybody who was going to use the portal stepped inside. Imperial Prince Cedric and I were in the front of the group, facing Christelle. The Imperial Prince Bastard was as stoic as ever while looking at Christelle, but he seemed oddly upset. Though he must have known about her coming to the portal since he didn't seem shocked. It seemed as if I was the only one who was out of the loop once again. Young Lady Sarnez, why are you? No, Questions like these are meaningless now. I've told myself many times that it is normal for the main character and the male lead of a rom-fan to run into each other. It was obvious why Christelle would be at the portal since she was going to participate in the great clearance of demonic beasts as well. The two of them were fated to run into each other. I calmed the sleepily grumbling Demi in my arms as I changed my question. What is up with that whip? The shiny blue leather looked scary. Ah, I copped one from upstairs. Christelle waved the hand holding the whip as she responded energetically. I was debating whether it was okay to show that I understood what she meant by copped, but a person standing next to me responded instead. It's been a while, young lady Sarnez. Are you planning on using the whip as your weapon? It was Vice Captain Elisabeth, who was traveling with us. Her gray eyes sparkled as she walked up to Christelle. The two of them had met at the exterior training ground before, but they probably had no chance to speak to each other because that meeting had come to a screeching halt. Hello, Vice Captain Elisabeth. If it's okay, may I take a look at your whip? Yes, of course. It was difficult for me to suddenly handle swords or spears because I had never used my muscles before. I nagged the knights at the duchy to help me find a weapon that someone like me could use, and they recommended a whip. It is not a bad decision if you take good care of your arm. This is a high-quality item as well. Thank you very much. Thankfully I have a decent wrist snap. Christelle had a bright smile on her face as she received the whip back. She seemed to like this new conversation partner. Vice Captain Elisabeth also smiled and nodded her head. She then told Christelle to come find her if she ever needed a sparring partner. I had a feeling that the two of them would get along, but seeing them together like this made me believe that they could become very good friends. Enough chit-chat. Let's go. The Imperial Prince poured cold water on the warm mood. I looked up at the bastard with a pitying gaze. I could understand why Vice Captain Elisabeth was his only friend. You should try chatting with Christelle too instead of arguing with her all the time. My apologies, Your Royal Highness. Everybody, attention. Half of the guards will remain here and be the last to teleport. The other half, come this way. Vice Captain Elisabeth quickly looked serious before respectfully saluting the Imperial Prince and giving orders to the Imperial Guard members. The attendants and royal servants accompanying us stood in their respective positions as well. Christelle sent the Vice Captain of the Imperial Guard off with a slightly disappointed look on her face before coming to stand next to me. Unintentionally standing with the main characters on both sides of me made me feel extremely frustrated. I silently rubbed the sleeping Demise back for some animal therapy. The vanguard entered the portal and disappeared to the imperial capital's southern area. Seeing the magic formation swallowing people with red metallic light and watching the people disappear like dust filled me with both awe and fear. When it was finally our turn, I felt nervous, not because of my mana sensitivity, but because of my mental health. I heard about the situation. Did you put the motion sickness medicine on, Your Highness? Christelle gently asked. Ah, yes. Then it should be okay. It should. We did some clinical trials. She laughed out loud and encouraged me after I responded. Vice Captain Elisabeth, Gunnell, Benjamin, and the Imperial Prince's attendant, David, who were all on top of the large magic formation with us, each told me not to worry as well. It made me feel a bit better. We don't need a mage. I had a small smile on my face when I heard a cold low voice. I raised my head to see what was going on. I could see the Ligo portal mage standing with an awkward look on his face and the Imperial Prince standing in front of him. What is going on? It is as I said. I will use my mana so another mage is unnecessary. His orange eyes were full of caution. It seemed as if he did not like other people's mana touching him. I couldn't help but sigh. He was as tall as a giraffe but acted like a 24-month toddler instead of a 24-years-old adult. I seemed to be the only person who could handle this issue since Cardinal Boutier was not here. As you wish, Your Royal Highness. I'm extremely sorry, Mage Nim. Please just consider it as conserving your mana. The Imperial Prince bastard scowled at my apology. The portal mage bowed and quickly retreated. I then asked the Imperial Prince. In return, you have to do it as gently as that Mage Nim would have done, Your Royal Highness. Please count to 3 and then insert your mana, now. Wing. The Imperial Prince channeled his red mana into the magic formation without any warning. What he showed us at the Empress Palace's underground portal seemed to have just been a teaser, as his mana ruthlessly gobbled up the magic formation as if it was lava that had just shot out of a volcano. Christelle laughed in disbelief. Vice Captain Elizabeth was shaking her head. The portal activated quicker than I could swear. Demi was grumbling after having just woken up. I tightly hugged the red panda and glared at the Imperial Prince's eyes that were disappearing like sparks into the red mana. I felt the ground underneath my feet disappear as his mana grabbed me by the collar. I looked down to see the tips of my hands, my feet, and Demi's tail disappearing like dust. Hey Mr. Mage, I don't feel so good. Thankfully, I was fine. Marquis Duham's motion sickness medicine worked wonders. I was able to arrive at the southern part of the imperial capital without any dizziness at all and maintained my good condition after getting on another carriage. The only negative was that there was a sir who was upset because of this portal travel. Squeal. Yes, you were shocked. You were upset. Screech. Yes, you're angry because Big Bro didn't wake you up and suddenly put you in a portal. Crew. Yes, Big Bro is really sorry. Can good little Demi forgive him this one time? Demi, you're an esteemed divine beast while Big Bro is a mere human. Your Highness. Benjamin called out to me with a face that seemed to be implying that I shouldn't be saying that. I put Demi down on my knees because it made me feel a bit awkward. The red panda headbutted my palm as if he was still angry. It was warm and soft. I thought it would be okay because Marquis Duham said it would be fine, but I guess I shouldn't have let him sleep. Benjamin knew what I was talking about. Marquis Francois Duham said a few days ago that he was certain there would be no problems for Demi to use the portal since divine beasts have high mana sensitivity. I was honestly dubious. That was because the divine beasts that had been sent to the march last time did not use portals to avoid any potential problems. The Marquis admitted the truth at that point. To be honest with you, I have tried teleporting with the divine beasts in my arms. It went well. So, you do not need to worry, Your Highness. He's completely crazy. No, Your Highness. It would have been difficult for you to wake Demi Nim since he managed to sleep soundly in that loud commerce center. Gunnell took my side. He was right, so I smiled and handed Demi 3 raspberries. I looked a bit upset but he could not reject the sweet scent of the raspberries. Nom 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 nom, you're eating so well. Either way, I got past that giant hurdle of a portal. All that was left was to make sure Demi and I stayed safe at the great clearance of demonic beasts. The main characters will take care of themselves. Asterisk, we've arrived at our accommodations, Your Highness. Slurp. I quickly slurped up the drool around my mouth and woke up. I had beef jerky, coulomiers, salad, and about 4 quiches filled with different fillings before I passed out. I somewhat remember looking out the window and enjoying the view, but the forest path of the Empire became pretty repetitive, similar to how the view on the freeway becomes repetitive after 5 minutes. The sun was setting when I woke up. It is extremely shabby compared to the Imperial Palace. However, it should have all of the basics as this is a place where the nobles and the Imperial family stay every so often. Benjamin explained our lodging to me. I nodded my head. We were staying at some inn instead of a noble's castle. I wondered how this made sense with the Imperial Prince being here with us, but the road to the Duham March, located at the southern part of the Empire, was rough. There was no lord's castle to stay in, and doing so would require a significant detour. You would waste more time if you wanted to look for that 5-star hotel. We ended up spending the first night at Lucas Village. Clack, clack, clack. The carriage slowed down before it stopped. I put the now energetic Demi on my shoulder and got off the carriage with the coachman's escort. I then looked around. Wow, I could see a clean building in between the quickly moving attendants and royal servants from the Imperial Palace. It was rather large for an inn, and reminded me of a small hotel in the European countryside. There were magic lights scattered around to keep the darkness at bay and make people feel safe. There was a plaque at the front of the building with the words, Le Cifre Inn. Your Highness. Benjamin quietly called out to me. I snapped out of my thoughts and looked behind me. Eek! I quietly gasped. There were approximately 1,000 or so residents of Lucas gathered in front of the inn, bowing with their heads on the ground. I had seen something similar at the imperial capital as well, but this felt completely different. The people at the capital seemed to be showing their affection and respect for the imperial family with their bowing, but these people seemed to give off a sense of awe. I could see a lot of their backs shaking. We greet His Royal Highness, may you shine like the sun, I could hear a young child's sobbing voice. I turned my head to see a young girl standing in front of the imperial Prince Cedric with a bouquet in her hands. She seemed to be only around 10 years old, but she must be the village representative to greet the imperial family. The adults who made a kid do this are the worst, but I immediately walked up to the imperial prince. I was worried that he would treat the child heartlessly. However, Russell, the imperial prince, received the bouquet with a simple movement. The girl became shocked, knelt down, and lowered her head. I blinked my eyes a few times at this unexpected turn of events. Unpack the things and hand them out. Yes, Your Royal Highness. The attendants started moving even quicker at the imperial prince's order. I finally realized why we had come with so much stuff. There was a reason all 10 carriages were teleported through the portal. They were not things for him to use. Please stand in 5 lines. We will hand out the imperial gifts from His Royal Highness. Please write your name here, and over here. I'm so honored by this imperial blessing. This doesn't seem like the type of person who would be called Cedric. I looked at the residents who were bowing 90 degrees over and over again while following the imperial prince into the lodging with quick steps. Christelle, who had walked up next to me at some point, was looking at the imperial prince's back and saying, 2 sides, she was in shock as well. She was saying that she saw a new side to him. Your loyal subject greets our esteemed Royal Highness. We will serve you to the best of our abilities, Your Royal Highness. I walked into the lobby to see cleanly dressed employees and a person who seemed to be the owner bowing toward the imperial prince. This felt a bit burdensome outside of the imperial palace. Thankfully, we should be able to rest peacefully inside since we rented the whole inn, Russell. The imperial prince shoved the bouquet into my arms. He then followed the inn owner up the stairs without even looking back. What the heck? My apologies, Prince Jesse. His Royal Highness does not like to have things in his hands. I will take care of it if you give it to me. David, the imperial prince's attendant, quickly walked over and apologized on his behalf. Basically, it meant that the bastard threw the bouquet away by shoving it in my arms. Hey, this is why Young Yuns calls you Cedric. He's the type to earn some points and then lose them all with his actions. Why does he live his life in such a difficult way? Christelle launched a fact missile from next to me. David looked as if he heard her, but did not dare to say anything. I could hear Vice Captain Elizabeth coming in behind us while holding Gunnell's arm and laughing. I couldn't help but sigh. I will keep the flowers in my room. I would feel too bad throwing them away and wasting the girls' efforts. Then I will provide you with the water. Christelle responded with a smile on her face. I couldn't tell whether she was making fun of me or cheering me on. I just wanted to eat some dinner and go to sleep. TWSB, Chapter 43. Live twice. 1. The Imperial Palace feels so empty without the children. Aurélie Boutier leisurely commented. She was savoring the scent of the coffee in her hand. Empress Frederick snorted at the Cardinal's comment while looking over the Empire's matters while sitting across from her. You're feeling empty because the 2 of them have left for a moment. We won't be able to see them for over 10 days. It would have been the same even if we were the ones to go to the great clearance of demonic beasts. I guess that is true. The Cardinal smiled gently and brought the cup to her lips. The peaceful silence returned to the Empress's office. The Empress would click her tongue and quietly swear while looking through the documents, and the Cardinal would respond to the Empress from time to time while flipping through her book. A sunset similar to their beloved child's eyes was visible outside the large window. It was a peaceful May. This time of year was usually hectic for them, taking portals to go to the Duum March, but it was a joyous occasion to have a quiet spring like this for the first time in a long while. They should have arrived at that small village by now. The Cardinal was the one who started speaking again. The Empress responded a moment later, without taking her eyes off of the piece of paper in her hand. What village? The one with nice villagers and the innkeeper who likes gambling. Frederick slightly frowned. It was the same frown that would make people think of Imperial Prince Cedric. Of course, it would be more accurate to say that it was Cedric being like his mother. Are there only 1 or 2 villages like that? Remember that time when we traveled a few days by carriage because there was a crack in one of the portals? It's the place we stayed in during that storm. The cardinal added on with a smile on her face. The empress finally raised her cherry-colored eyes and looked at her contractor. She was scowling as if she was recalling a moment from the past. If it is the place I am thinking about, I remember that the inn owner was taken to the prison in the Lord's castle. Ah, that's right, I forgot about it since it happened so long ago. Has it already been 10 years? Aurélie Boutier had that thought as she sipped her coffee again. It wasn't a serious topic, so Frederick looked down at the document in her hand again. Silence filled the room once again. For a moment, the only sounds that filled the area between the two of them were of clothes and papers rustling. I plan on opening a new wine for dinner. Then who is running the inn right now? The two of them spoke at the same time. Frederick, who was thinking about calling the chief of staff to bring her a wine list and some tasting notes, looked at Aurélie with an extremely disgruntled look. The cardinal's beige-colored eyes curled up and she continued speaking, as if to console the empress. It's where the children will be staying. I am concerned. It's probably a family member of the person who was imprisoned. I doubt there will be any problems since we have not heard much until now. That is true. Sadie and Elisabeth will soon become sword masters. The prince is a bishop-level priest, and that little Sarnez girl is a novice holy knight. You're worried for no reason. Okay, I'm feeling a fish dish today. The empress nodded her head and summoned the chief of staff. She was informed that a decent white wine from the south had been offered to the empress. The cardinal knew that the empress reacted this way not because she didn't care about the children, but because she trusted them. She was trying her best to think in a similar way. She was sure that the 2 children, no, the 4 children with Elisabeth and Christelle included, would be fine and come back safely. They would be able to take care of things cleanly even if something happened along the way. Prince Jesse, the eldest of the group, wasn't very young. She felt guilty, like a noble parent leaving mischievous troublemakers with a single personal tutor as she finished her coffee. Wow, that was so delicious. Yes, it was delicious, Your Highness. It wasn't bad for me either, Your Highness. Squeal. I commented first, followed by Gunnell, Benjamin, and Demi to show our satisfaction with our dinner. Honestly speaking, Demi was only eating the flowers from the bouquet the imperial prince shoved at me, but I was relieved that he was finding it delicious. Ordering room service was probably one of the best decisions I made today. My mind was at peace despite being far away from the imperial palace since I was eating while being surrounded by the people I could be relaxed around. Knock knock. Come in. Benjamin responded to the knocking. I watched as a burly inn employee came in to clear the dishes. The man seemed to be in his mid-20s and seemed nice. He was also the person who carried my bags to the 3rd floor and brought our food. There were some Imperial Guard members with serious gazes behind him. They were here to protect us. Thank you very much for the meal. It is an honor, Your Highness. I thanked him for the meal because it felt awkward to sit here without saying anything, but the employee flinched and bowed. The way he quickly and efficiently cleared the table despite looking flustered made him seem quite experienced. Desserts were then placed on the table. The desserts were crepes Suzette that gave off the sweet scent of oranges. I can taste it just by looking at it. Gunnell chuckled at my comment. We had crepes Suzette here when we came 10 years ago as well. I'm sure you will like it too, Your Highness. Benjamin responded in a benign voice. He said that he came through before while attending to the empress and the cardinal. I picked up a new knife as I intently listened to what he was saying. I remember something slightly unpleasant happening at that time though. Clang. Everybody flinched and turned our heads toward the noise. The employee had broken a large dish and was standing there, not knowing what to do. The Imperial Guard members took a few steps forward and the guy shook like he had been electrocuted before quickly plopping down to the ground. He seemed to be planning on cleaning the broken pieces with his bare hands. Are you okay? Why, yes, I am okay. I truly apologize for this, Your Highness. You may get hurt, so why don't we get a broom? Red blood dripped down to the ground. I stopped talking and walked toward him. Benjamin and Gunnell got up and followed behind me. The Imperial Guard members pushed the pieces of glass far away with their feet. They seemed to be preparing in case something bad happened. There was a large gash on the man's right hand. The injury seems pretty deep. Should I call another employee for you? No, it is okay, Your Highness. I can stop the bleeding myself. Then let's ask them to bring some medicine up. It is okay, Your Highness. Medicine is expensive. I tilted my head in confusion. I will pay for the medicine. The man seemed hesitant. He seemed to be debating on whether or not it was okay to say something. I calmly waited for his explanation. I need to personally pay the inn back for the price of any medicine I use. That is the rule here at La Cifra. The employee needs to pay for medicine despite getting hurt while working. That is the case, Your Highness. I looked back at Benjamin and Gunnell in disbelief. Both of them shook their heads at my gaze that was asking if this was the norm for the Ryester Empire. It meant that the inn owner was a weird person. Then I guess it'll be fine if it heals without any medicine. Excuse me, please open your palm. I will use my healing power on you. The man jumped up after hearing my proposal. How could someone like me dare? I have learned how to do it, but this is my first time using it. Please just think of it as being my guinea pig and feel at ease. I calmly consoled him. It was the truth. Priests need to release a special healing circle when using healing powers that can only be opened if you memorize the shape of the circle. It was completely different from the holy domain that created its own pattern based on the priest's character and divine power. That was the reason there were specific healing priests on the continent. It truly was difficult to become a doctor both in this world and the other. I had been following Cardinal Boutier's suggestion, drawing the circle on paper and memorizing it. There were many different types of healing circles as well, but the one I memorized was one of the basic circles used for light injuries and small cuts. Don't feel too burdened. You are helping me by letting me do this. I quickly added on. The man raised his head and looked at Gunnell, Benjamin, and the Imperial Guard members before slowly nodding his head. He then carefully opened his bloodied palm. Then I will get started. I closed my eyes. I knelt down, took one big breath, channeled my ether from head to toe, before accurately drawing the healing circle without flaw in my head. I didn't forget to recite the incantation either. The Almighty God's tears shall gather your blood. As I said that and opened my eyes, a sky blue circle gently appeared on the ground and surrounded the employee and me. It was as clear as I had read about in the book. The healing circle slowly turned clockwise and seemed to be looking for something until it created a small miracle on top of the man's injured palm. Seeing the blue ether pebbles seeping into the long gash made me think of an ad on TV. The flowing blood instantly stopped and the gash slowly closed. Even I couldn't help but to drop my jaw in shock, despite being the person who used the healing power. The employee blinked his eyes a few times. He clenched his fist a few times as if he could not believe what just happened in his hand, before quickly bowing his head on the ground. Thank you very much, Your Highness. You've given such a blessing to a commoner like me, thank you very much. No, I should be thanking you for cooperating with me. I smiled bitterly. He had a bright smile on his face for the first time since coming into the room, and said that he would bring new crepes Suzette. Demi and I were the only ones left in the room now that it was 9 p.m. Gunnell and Benjamin were sharing a room next door. Screech, it was a long day, wasn't it? That is how it is when you go traveling. Demi stretched out across my stomach and sighed. At least, it seemed that way to me. I was laying at an angle on the bed, consoling the little punk while drawing healing circles on a piece of paper. While taking care of Morris, the inn employee's injury during dinner, I had the idea that it would be good to memorize a lot of healing circles. How great would it be if I could have abilities like this when I go back? The red panda raised his tail after hearing my mumbling. I couldn't help but chuckle at his action. I knew that it was nonsense. Even if I could use healing powers in the real world, it was highly likely that I would be unable to memorize these complicated circles to activate them. The more serious the ailments they heal, the more difficult the circles are to memorize. Slowly building up, Starting with the simplest circles is the path down this royal road. Should we wash up and go to sleep early? Knock knock. Someone knocked on the door at that moment. There were Imperial Guard members stationed on the 3rd floor where I was staying, as well as in all of the hallways of Lucifera. I had no reason to be wary of a visitor even during the late hours. I put down the wet towel I was going to use to wash Demi, and got up to open the door. "Hello, Your Highness. Young Lady Sarnez." I felt the need for a defibrillator. My heart sank. This was my first time meeting Christelle alone since our initial meeting at the Imperial Palace's confessional. There was at least a wooden window between us at that time, but right now, I was wearing a shirt that had at least 2 buttons undone. "Have you had your meal, Your Highness?" "Of course. And yourself, young Lady Sarnez?" I brought my right hand forward as naturally as possible and covered the left side of my neck. I thought that it might help cover myself up a bit more. I knew that I was being excessively self-conscious, but it was definitely a scary thing to be alone with the main character in casual clothing at this hour. Yes, I was thinking about going for a walk because I was full. "I heard that the night market at Lucas Village is open today." Christelle smiled brightly. I felt my heart grow darker while looking at this smile that seemed to make the whole world brighter. She wants to go out again. Is this a holy knight's stamina? "Why don't you go with Vice Captain Elizabeth? I am a bit tired." I quickly declined, not taking a single step from the door. The corners of my lips felt as if they would start spasming. I did ask Vice Captain Elizabeth first, but she cannot leave the inn because of work. Apparently it would be difficult unless His Royal Highness you left. "Vice Captain Elizabeth, then I guess you can go with His Royal Highness." I smiled. Christelle's eyes scrunched suspiciously. "You know that His Royal Highness and I are not comfortable around each other. Are you trying to make me not have fun?" "No, of course not. I will go if His Royal Highness goes." Did I make a mistake?" Christelle's blue-gray eyes sparkled dangerously. She put a hand up to her chin and seemed to be thinking about something for a moment before bowing extremely respectfully to me and smiling. She then turned around and walked away toward the stairs. I quickly closed the door and hugged Demi. That was so scary. There's no way she's really going to bring that Imperial Prince bastard, right? There's no way that that bastard would come. No way, right. TWSB, Chapter 44, Live Twice 2. However, that actually became reality. The group has grown quite large. I opened the door and looked at the group of children standing in the hallway. There was an excited Christelle, a pretending to be calm but clearly excited, Vice Captain Elizabeth, Gunnell, whom I had no idea as to why he was a part of this group, and "Are you not tired, Your Royal Highness?" The bastard naturally ignored my question. I had no idea what she said to convince him, but Christelle actually succeeded in dragging the Imperial Prince here. He was standing firm with a long black robe while glaring at me. "How is this possible? I thought the two of you weren't very close." I debated whether she threatened or blackmailed him, but either way, I had no way out at this point. We will be too noticeable going out like this. Everybody here doesn't have the typical appearance. I had to at least attempt one last resistance. That is why I prepared these. "Tada!" Christelle smiled brightly and showed me a small basket. I peeked in to see suspicious-looking medicines and glasses. I gulped. I could hear Demi, who was plopped on the bed, snoring. We've never been somewhere like this before, have we? "No, we have not, ma'am." Vice Captain Elizabeth, whose dark green hair was now brown, and Gunnell, whose sky blue hair was now also brown, were walking together in front of the group. Christelle had purchased more than just the whip from the Ligo Central Commerce Center. She must have expected this event, as she gathered all sorts of magic tools to help with disguise and camouflage. She said that she bought a lot of other things too, but I didn't dare to ask about them. I had the damn Imperial Prince bastard to my left and the MC to my right as we walked through the night market. I tried multiple times to slowly back away, but Christelle would immediately notice and stare at me like a ghost, so I couldn't leave. The street that was lit up as much as possible with small, cheap magic lights was extremely busy. It was as if every resident of Lucas Village was here. Stalls selling all sorts of products, Foods and alcohol were packed one after the other with the fountain at the center. There were even children running through the narrow street with large dogs. It felt completely different from the imperial palace or the imperial capital. Your Highness, do you want to try that? I was smiling at the children when Christelle started talking to me. Her eyes, that were now brown because of eye drops, were looking at me. I turned toward where she was pointing. Dagger throwing competition. It looks dangerous. They said it is okay because the tip is blunt. Let's see, get a prize by simply hitting the target. Anybody who hits the center will receive the shopkeeper's special pastrami sandwich and dragon fruit juice. Ah, it is food. I prefer money. Let's try it. I responded to her. Excuse me, shouldn't we aim for the winning prize since we came all the way out here to the night market? You suddenly became so serious, Prince Jesse. Right this way, Your Royal Highness. The Imperial Prince quietly sighed at my comment. He did not like medicine touching his body and instead used a pair of disguise glasses. He still looked like the regular Imperial Prince to us since we knew his true identity. But the expensive glasses seemed effective, as nobody else seemed to pay any attention to him. Welcome, for 3 people. It is 10 francs for 3 tries. Okay, I'll pay. The nice-looking shopkeeper greeted us with an apron on. Christelle responded energetically and handed her 30 francs. Vice Captain Elisabeth and Gunnell got chicken skewers from somewhere and were eating them while watching the situation with joy. Thank you very much, young Lady Sarnez. I quietly thanked her. It was nothing. I will go first. I wish you luck. The shopkeeper wished Christelle luck and handed her an old dagger. Christelle slightly pulled the robe back over her head and raised her arm. Her now dark brown hair was tightly braided down. She moved her dagger-wielding right arm forward and back and aimed toward the target before. Tap. Ooh, she hit the target on her first try. 2 people in the audience screamed with excitement. It wasn't right at the center, but the fact that she hit the target on her first try showed potential. Then I will throw this time. I received the dagger from the shopkeeper. I could not give up on this mesmerizing combination of a pastrami sandwich and dragon fruit juice. Christelle laughed while asking why I looked so serious, but I could not laugh with her. I couldn't ever hit the dartboard at the bars during college. I wonder how I will do here. Both my mind and body felt terrible. 3 people were gathered around me whispering nonstop. Your Highness, I guess you really are only overflowing in ether. Please be quiet, young Lady Sarnez. Cheer up, Your Highness. I will order you a pastrami sandwich from the chef as soon as we arrive at the march. Thank you. Throwing is all about the wrist, Your Highness. You cannot rely on your arm. It is already too late. The 3 daggers in my hand were killed heroically as 5 people, including the shopkeeper, watched on. I loathed the author and felt so embarrassed that I almost started grinding my teeth. What kind of second male lead has no monosensitivity or physical abilities? I received the shopkeeper's open sneering while Christelle struck the target with all 3 daggers. Grandpa, are you not going to throw? The woman's voice brought me out of this deep swamp of despair. I turned my head to see that the shopkeeper was talking to the Imperial Prince. He must seem like a grandpa to others because of the glasses. Vice Captain Elisabeth covered her mouth with her hand and started laughing. The Imperial Prince looked a bit upset but took the daggers without causing any issues. His orange eyes clouded over while he held the dagger and observed it. Wait a minute, this bastard, thud. Christelle put down the cup of beer that she emptied about halfway. Her large round eyes were full of complaints. Using magic was cheating. Young Lady Sarnez, calm down and try this dish. I pushed the pastrami sandwich on the table toward Christelle. There were 3 sandwiches made with homemade rye bread, pastrami, and coleslaw in front of us. I was eating one by myself while the good friends Vice Captain Elisabeth and Gunnell were sharing another one. The number of people at this street vendor's stall was not going down despite it being almost 11 p.m. I could have hit the center too if I dipped the dagger in water before I threw it. It's totally doable, and the reason you didn't turn those words into action. The Imperial Prince retorted back. The person who hit the center of the target 3 times in a row at the dagger throwing contest, just now to win the 3 sandwich sets did not even touch them. I was happy to benefit from it, but I didn't expect the two of them to start provoking each other like this again. I'm thankful for the sandwich, but please don't tease the young lady, Your Royal Highness. So, he really was making fun of me. I couldn't tell whether he was being serious because he had some alcohol in him. Christelle commented after I tried to stop the Imperial Prince. I checked her cup to see if she was drunk and noticed the 750 milliliters or so of beer was all gone from it. She drinks a lot. No, he says that he is not making fun of you. I immediately changed what I said. The Imperial Prince bastard raised one eyebrow, but I completely ignored it. I've thought about it since a few days ago, but it seems as if I need to slowly change my strategy. If I am unable to avoid these two people, I would probably feel better if I manage to stick the two of them together. I know that it won't be easy to make that happen as I please, but I wanted to at least try. You also have the prize you won, young Lady Sarnez. Yes, it's pretty. The sandwich is gone when you eat it, but I can keep this for a long time. She treasured the mental victory and took out the crocheted decoration. The shopkeeper gifted 3 crocheted decorations in the shapes of 3 divine items: the Blessing of the Blue Sea, Sword of Wisdom from the Flaming Star, and the Ark of the Wind Deity. I was told that there were a lot of souvenirs in the shapes of the 4 divine items at the Empire. It felt similar to selling Eiffel Tower keychains in Paris or Cheomsungdae chocolates in Jeongju. Cheomsungdae is an astronomical observatory in Jeongju, South Korea. I'll take this one and I will give this one to you, Your Highness. As for this one, Christelle hesitated for a bit before handing the Sword of Wisdom-shaped loop to the Imperial Prince with a slightly irritable gaze. I barely held myself back from smiling. I offer this to you, Your Royal Highness. Thank you very much, young Lady Sarnez. I thought that the Imperial Prince bastard might reject it, so I quickly set the tone to make him feel obligated to accept it. I grabbed the sandwich and juice that Christelle did not eat and pushed it toward Vice Captain Elisabeth and Gunnell. The two of them, who had been quietly chatting with each other, smiled with joy. The Imperial Prince silently looked at the loop of the Sword of Wisdom on the table before grabbing it and putting it in his pocket. It sent chills of joy down my body. Wow, I should have done this a long time ago. It felt as if the two of them would quickly get closer to each other as long as I nudged them a little bit. Thank you all for coming out with me tonight. I was shouting for Jungyuns in my mind after seeing this new ray of hope when Christelle continued talking. The shopkeeper had given her a refill, so she had a full cup of beer in her hand. There were a lot of things I wanted to do, but the attendant I brought with me from home seemed to want to shield me from everything. I understand why, but she chugged her beer. Vice Captain Elisabeth was not drinking because she was on duty and was sharing the dragon fruit juice with Gunnell. I didn't drink and the Imperial Prince didn't order anything, so Christelle was the only one drinking at our table. Thinking of this as a second life made me want to live without any regrets. That is why I asked for such esteemed people's time late at night, fully knowing that it was disrespectful. That's okay, young Lady Sarnez. I understand. Vice Captain Elisabeth warmly responded and clinked her juice cup gently with Christelle's beer cup. It sounded as if Christelle was being sappy because she was drunk, but I couldn't help but have a bitter smile on my face. The other 3 people probably thought she was talking about a second life because she had been sick for a long time. However, I knew the truth about Christelle's situation. There are a lot of things I wanted to do, live my second life without any regrets. It made sense for someone who submitted her letter of resignation and ended up being transmigrated to this world. I thought that it might continue in that motif, but it was reality for the MC. I knew that this was a novel, but this place was a new opportunity for Christelle. It is nice and cool up north during summer. Let's all go together. Damn it, I told you the money was due at midnight. Flinch. A husky man's voice drowned out Vice Captain Elisabeth's whisper. Our heads naturally turned toward the voice. The loud stall instantly became quiet. I had to pay off my debts elsewhere first. Debt. Then is what you owe to the inn, not debt. Do you think that, La Cifra, is a pushover? The man, who clearly looked like a thug, kicked a wooden table. Clang. Glass broke, and the food that a customer had left was spilled on the floor. I frowned. That guy just talked about the inn we are staying in. Mr. Felix, why are you acting like this when there are customers here? Someone moved in front of the shopkeeper at that moment. My eyes opened wide after seeing the person. It was Morris, the inn employee I had used my healing powers on a few hours ago. The thug also recognized him and calmed down a bit. Move. This bastard slithered his way out like this last month too. I'll put in a good word with my aunt. You. The thug glared at Morris with frustration. I started thinking about who Morris's aunt might be. Maybe, how are you going to eventually inherit the inn when you are such a pushover? How are you going to take control of the village? I don't have any thoughts about that. How stupid. You're missing your chance to be the lord in the countryside. The thug spit on the floor before giving the shopkeeper behind Morris the finger and heading for a different stall. It seemed to be a sort of warning. The stall slowly started returning to life after the situation ended. I turned and looked at the others. My goodness. Gunnell seemed shocked at this situation. Vice Captain Elizabeth was also looking at the Imperial Prince with a stiff expression on her face. What do you wish to do, Your Royal Highness? The Imperial Prince's eyes grew dim in thought. I cautiously interrupted. I know Morris. Oh, he's the guy who stopped the situation. He is one of the inn employees. Christelle suddenly stood up from her seat. I looked up to see a serious look on her face. Wait a minute, oh esteemed author Nim. Why is the MC smiling right now? TWSB, Chapter 45, Live Twice 3, Life truly is unpredictable. I was happy up until yesterday because I was able to eat with Gunnell, Benjamin, and Demi, but this morning, I voluntarily came downstairs for breakfast. Of course, it was not the buffet style commonly seen in the modern world. I was sitting at a round table with Christelle, Vice Captain Elizabeth, and Imperial Prince Cedric. Long story short, the meal was pretty calm. This combination would have caused quite the ruckus any other time, but the four of us had come to a sort of agreement before returning to the inn last night. The plates on the table started to empty and the Imperial Prince put down his utensils. I took a big bite of a warm croissant with whipped cream and blackcurrant jam to cleanse my palate. It's so good. I said it quietly, but Christelle looked at me and smiled. Someone knocked on the dining area's door at that moment. Knock knock knock. Come in. A woman entered after Vice Captain Elizabeth responded. There were 5 Imperial Guard members behind her. The Imperial Guard had summoned the innkeeper. Your loyal subject greets His esteemed Royal Highness, Prince Venetian, young Countess Maudet, and young Lady Sarnez. The innkeeper, Claudine Green, walked into the dining area and bowed respectfully. I carefully observed her face. The woman, who had personally escorted the Imperial Prince to his room yesterday, seemed to be in her mid-30s and had a gentle look similar to Morris. It was hard to imagine that she would do such a thing. I wish to show my gratitude for the hospitality shown by the Lucas Village and the Lucifera Inn. I am honored, Your Royal Highness. It was nothing compared to the imperial benevolence we have received. Claudine lowered her head even more and answered modestly at the Imperial Prince's words of gratitude. I heard that she was a commoner, but she acted and spoke elegantly, probably because she had experience dealing with nobles and the imperial family. The Imperial Prince's orange eyes squinted a bit before he said what we had discussed. That is why I am thinking about staying another day. Excuse me. Claudine raised her head with a slightly anxious voice before realizing who she was talking to and quickly lowering her gaze. Young Lady Sarnez has only recently recovered from her illness and is feeling tired. It won't be a bad idea to rest a little longer. The Imperial Prince's low voice was so cold it sounded almost frigid as he said his pre-planned words. Claudine seemed to think that there was some logic to his words as she nodded her head a few times. Everybody in the Empire knew that Christelle had been asleep for 3 years. Our little trip last night was a secret that only Benjamin and David knew about. We will work even harder to repay you for your trust, Your Royal Highness. Claudine responded in a higher and happier voice. The Imperial Prince looked away from her without saying anything else. That seemed to be the signal as the Imperial Guard members left the dining area with her. Employees of the inn came in after that. They were clearing the dishes and serving dessert. I thoroughly observed the employees while Christelle put up a terrible little act going, "Ah, my darn iron deficiency anemia. Found him. Hello Morris. Did you sleep well, Prince Jesse. Morris seemed shocked and his shoulders curled forward at my greeting. I smiled and watched him put down a plate of cookies shaped like tulips with sherbet on them. The employees then bowed and started leaving the dining area when, "Morris, I have something to discuss with you regarding what happened yesterday." I stopped Morris from leaving. I didn't forget to raise my right palm and wave. He nodded his head and walked toward me. The other employees seemed to think that I was going to scold Morris, and quickly lowered their gazes and closed the dining area door behind them. Click. Gunnell, who had been quietly standing there, quickly locked the door. Morris blinked like a scared little calf. "Is your hand okay?" "Excuse me." Yes, Your Highness. "It is all thanks to your help. Thank you for your divine benevolence." "That's a relief. Then I will ask about something else now." "Yes, of course. Please ask whatever question you may have." He respectfully clasped his hands together. I looked directly at him and started my questioning. "Someone named Felix threatened a shopkeeper at the night market last night." I wished to hear an explanation. The young man gasped. He cautiously looked up before noticing that we were all looking at him and turning pale. So, Miss Claudine Green, the innkeeper, is your aunt?" "Yes, Your Highness. We aren't very far apart in age, but my grandfather and my aunt took me in when I became an orphan." Morris explained the situation. He shoved his large body into a small chair while being pseudo-interrogated by us. The grandfather he was talking about was the person who ran the inn before Claudine inherited it. According to Benjamin, that grandfather was extorting money from the villagers using terrible means and was caught by Cardinal Boutier, who happened to be staying here. Empress Frederick, who was with her, immediately sent him to the prison at the Lord's castle over 10 years ago. Claudine, the daughter of the criminal, was responsible for the inn after that. The fee it is money the Lucifer receives from the villagers. My aunt sends people to the night market and the vendors to collect the fee whenever members of the imperial family or nobles visit. Vice Captain Elisabeth looked astonished. Did she perhaps take a portion of the imperial gifts His Royal Highness bestowed on the villagers? That is right, Madam Young Countess. Morris responded with a sad look on his face. His voice was slowly getting heavier with guilt. The esteemed guests always bestow expensive gifts to the villagers in response to the warm welcome they receive. My aunt believes that it is only possible because the Lucifer Inn is here. Those esteemed guests would have no reason to come here if the inn did not exist and the villagers would not receive any gifts. All four of us frowned at the same time after hearing his explanation. Claudine wasn't completely wrong. The imperial family and great nobles have stayed in this place for a long time, so it wasn't a stretch to think that the gifts bestowed each time was because of the inn. However, that was absolutely not a proper justification to take people's money away. Furthermore, it wasn't as if the villagers were fooling around. I heard that they came out every morning to sweep the streets and beautify the whole village from the moment our itinerary was shared with them. They fixed the roads and baked bread for the Imperial Guard members even though they weren't paid for their labor. In fact, even the bouquet that the Imperial Prince received yesterday was hand-raised by the villagers who made sure to only use the best of the best flowers. I've committed a grave sin, Your Royal Highness. I tried to stop my aunt numerous times, but it was useless. Please punish me first. Morris bowed deeply and his whole body was shaking. He was 13 years old when his grandfather was sent to prison. It was probably not easy for him to change the situation since his aunt was his only remaining relative and he was a minor. I could imagine how Claudine treated her nephew since she makes him pay to use medicine from the inn. I can't be sure of anything after only hearing your explanation. The Imperial Prince responded after having heard the whole story silently. Morris flinched. I noticed that his sunset-colored eyes were burning with silent anger. "I will host a luncheon. Summon the representatives of the village." He made his proclamation. Phase 2 of the operation was now starting. After Imperial Prince Cedric called Claudine Green to show his gratitude and extend his stay for another day, he called the 2 village representatives to treat them to lunch. Anybody would think that the Imperial Prince was extremely satisfied with the village and the inn. Thanks to that, the chef of Romero Palace, who was accompanying the Imperial Prince, was busy all day. It was fine until now, but the problem was that the two village representatives who were in the dining area with us were unable to say anything because they were scared. I smiled bitterly and looked at them. Christelle was thinking hard about something next to me. It would have been different if the two middle-aged people were only wary of the imperial prince. I would have been able to tell him to try to lessen the pressure he was giving them. However, the person they were clearly wary of was, the final main dish is coq au vin. Please enjoy. It was this person. Claudine Green was smiling brightly while attending to us. She claimed that she was personally serving us as the innkeeper because it was a special occasion. However, I noticed her ulterior motive less than 5 minutes after the food came out. The middle-aged individuals would look down at their plate as soon as they made eye contact with her, while Claudine would stare each of them down for a while. Although she had this extremely compassionate look on her face, it was obvious that she was threatening the village representatives in some way. She was basically telling them to not even think about making any negative comments. The imperial prince quietly observed the table. They would need to send Claudine out of the room to hear from the village representatives. I was debating on what to do when I noticed Christelle silently mouthing something to Vice Captain Elisabeth. Act sick. The words she was mouthing were clear. Vice Captain Elisabeth's gray eyes opened wide at these words that were impossible to misunderstand. She pointed to herself and mouthed back. Me. Yes, act sick. Christelle winked with her left eye and then her right eye. It was amazing. I can't wink with either eye. Vice Captain Elisabeth quietly scoffed. She was biting her lips as if it was awkward and embarrassing to suddenly put up an act. I became anxious as well as I looked at her. Oh, suddenly. My stomach, PFFT. I quickly grabbed a napkin and pretended to wipe my mouth so that I wouldn't laugh. I saw the imperial prince fix the knife in his hand at this sudden act. Are you okay? You were shocked too, right? Oh my, young countess. Are you okay? Claudine stopped explaining about the food and asked Vice Captain Elisabeth. Our main character, MC, turned into Master of Ceremonies, MC, Christelle on cue. She brushed the young countess's hair and cheek before catching rhythm with a sorrowful look on her face. Not only has young Countess Maudet protected His Royal Highness as the vice captain of the Imperial Guard, she has done everything she could to support a weak person like me. Now that I think about it, she has not looked well since breakfast. I'm sorry for being so inattentive. We need to send the young countess up to her room and have an attendant help her to relax right away, Your Royal Highness. Wow, you can ad-lib all of that. I blankly dropped my jaw in shock when the Imperial Prince, who seemed to have a basic idea of what was going on, looked toward Claudine and nodded his head. The young countess is my close friend, so I want you to personally look after her. Excuse me. Yes, Your Royal Highness. I will treat her as best as possible. She seemed anxious for a moment but did not dare to talk back to the Imperial Prince. Someone who didn't know what was going on would think that Vice Captain Elisabeth's red face was a serious issue. Claudine immediately supported her and walked out of the dining area. Christelle, the Imperial Prince, Benjamin, Gunnell, David, the two village representatives and I were the only ones left. Gunnell, who was standing behind me, whispered to me in an urgent voice. Your Highness, did Georges leave just now because she really is sick? I turned to see that the young boy was completely pale. Georges, is he talking about Vice Captain Elisabeth? Vice Captain Elisabeth is fine. It's not real so don't worry, Gunnell. I quickly consoled Gunnell. His gold eyes slowly blinked a few times before he calmed down. His bright smile soon reappeared. I guess there's someone else who believed her acting. I smiled back at him and then turned toward Christelle. Thank you for taking care of that, young Lady Sarnez. It was nothing. Please treat Vice Captain Elisabeth to something nice later. It's going to be difficult for her to stall for time. Her blue-gray eyes were sparkling brightly. I continued to smile and turned toward our guests. The two middle-aged individuals were looking at us with blank expressions. I guess they would be shocked. Morris has told us about the situation. I started speaking without any hesitation. It was a speed battle from here. TWSB, Chapter 46. Live twice. Claudine looked as if she had venom flowing through her veins after her father was sent to prison. She changed completely. She was a very pure girl when she was younger. The two village representatives, Teddy and Marie, spoke with shaking voices. I peeked at their plates. It must be really uncomfortable for them as their main dish was getting cold because they had yet to touch the food. Claudine's father, he enjoyed gambling. He started small bets with his friends and eventually started inviting the villagers to the inn. We heard about that. He would goad the villagers into betting their gifts from the imperial family or nobles and then cheat to take them all. Yes, Your Highness. That is correct. Marie let out a big sigh and lowered her head. This was the gambling scam that Cardinal Boutier had seen 10 years ago. The criminal spit at the villagers and shouted about how they were just as dirty as him while he was dragged away. Benjamin said that he still clearly remembered how belligerent the man had been. Claudine focused only on renovating the inn for a while after her father was taken away. The villagers lived quietly as well. However, a père de Riester came through a few months later. After his visit, Claudine started demanding that we pay her a portion of the gifts as a fee. TL, Père de Riester, based on the Père de France of the Middle Ages, is a prestigious title and position held by the greatest, highest-ranking members of the Riester nobility. Have the people of Lucas village ever tried resisting her demand? Christelle asked Teddy. I was curious about this as well. Even if the Le Chiffre Inn was the landmark of Lucas village, Claudine would not have had a choice if the whole village collectively rejected her demand. There seemed to be at least 1,000 villagers. The staff at the inn were villagers as well. On the other hand, Claudine, who was in her 20s at the time, would have been alone. We were all wondering what kind of nonsense she was spewing at first. Most of the villagers ignored Claudine and did not pay any fee from the gifts bestowed upon us by the esteemed Père de Riester until he left. Then how, Claudine, she gathered the villagers and lit the inn on fire. Excuse me, she lit the Le Chiffre Inn on fire. Christelle and I raised our voices at the same time. Imperial Prince Cedric's garnet-like eyes fluctuated like lava. Yes, Your Highness. She talked about how we should all die together, and how the villagers should try to live as we had been without the inn. She was pouring gasoline on the front door and shouting like her father. That was when we realized that things were wrong. Marie raised a fist and pounded her chest. She then took a few big breaths as if the beating couldn't relieve her frustration. We were the ones who stepped up to put out the fire. About a tenth of the inn was on fire. We jumped into the flames without any protection and doused it with water. Claudine didn't move at all. We were scared that high-ranking guests would no longer come to the village. We were the ones who saved the inn. Claudine just watched. It felt as if she was supervising us. The two voices slowly became quieter. They looked as if they were either crying in defeat or laughing in shame. I let out a deep breath. The villagers pretty much lost all power to Claudine that day. I got chills thinking about the story I had just heard and the gentle and warm look on Claudine's face I had seen until now. I knew that external appearance didn't always match the internal character, but it seemed rare to have the two so completely different like this. We pretty much caused at least half of the issue. Teddy blamed himself for it. I quickly shook my head. When Claudine's father first started scamming people, many of the villagers treated as if it wasn't their issue. Some of them even pointed fingers at the victims, scolding them for going to gamble. That is why this situation after Claudine inherited the inn is. Please don't say things like that. I stopped him. It made no sense that the perpetrator felt no guilt while the victims felt so guilty. The middle-aged man was slightly shaking as he looked up at me. People are bound to act defensively if they believe that something they have had for a long time is about to suddenly disappear. Furthermore, this reaction is obvious when you consider that it is something that would affect your life and your ability to feed yourselves. You all put out the fire for your survival, so it is not something to feel ashamed about. The person who should be ashamed is Claudine. She used your lives to threaten you. Marie had raised her head and was blankly looking at me. I felt my cheeks getting hot with 4 pairs of eyes looking at me. I still thought that I should finish what I had to say. The gambling scams are the same thing. The clear culprit is in prison, so I hope you don't blame yourselves for it. I stopped after saying that. I usually didn't talk this much, but I always talked way too much like a busted dumpling whenever I got started. Teddy and Marie remained silent for a long time before they slowly nodded their heads and wiped their cheeks. The dining area was full of sniffling and mumblings of, "Thank you very much," for a while. "We will proceed as planned." The Imperial Prince was staring right at me before he started speaking. No emotions were visible on his handsome face. The plan he was talking about was using his authority as the Imperial Prince to arrest Claudine and send her to prison in the Lord's castle. It was the simplest and most effective method. It was also the same decision Empress Frederick had made 10 years ago. Last night, the Imperial Prince could not hide his discomfort at the fact that something his mother had taken care of was happening again. I slightly nodded my head at his comment. Now that we had figured out most of the situation, we needed to take care of it and prepare to leave. "You may leave." The Imperial Prince sent off the village representatives. His order for them to get out might make him seem like Cedric again, but I knew that he had given such an order because he was thinking about the two of them. It was such an uncomfortable lunch for them. It would be lucky if they didn't choke, and they looked exhausted after sharing such a difficult situation and crying. Furthermore, Claudine might notice something if she saw them like this. The middle-aged duo got up from their chairs and bowed deeply. "I have one question for you," Christelle suddenly commented at that moment. "If you could go back to that day when the inn was on fire, would you do the same thing?" "No, of course not. Absolutely not, young Lady Sarnez." Marie flailed both hands around and said no. Teddy lowered his head and added on. "There was a drought at the time as well, so we were very desperate. But now, we are at a point where we can all work together to make sure that nobody starves even without the gifts." "I see. I understand." Christelle seemed to think hard about something before she answered. The two representatives soon left the dining area. I confirmed that the door was closed before speaking. "Young Lady Sarnez, I believe that the villagers need a second chance." Christelle looked at me with her clear blue-gray eyes. Her eyes were so clear that I was temporarily at a loss for words. "They did it to survive, as you said, Your Highness. But they've had to deal with things like what happened yesterday for 10 years because their actions back then tied them down. Their immediate struggles might be resolved if the innkeeper is taken captive, but..." It was rare to see her trail off like this. I could see her grip tightening on her cup. Taking Claudine down isn't going to release the grip in their hearts. Christelle was shining like a single star in the night sky as she said that. I blanked out a bit while looking at her. I knew that she was the main character of Less Than Quit My Job and ended up as a noble young lady in another world greater than, and that Yunce loved her character so much because I had heard about it too many times to count. I thought that she looked and acted like a main character from the moment I first met her. But I wish to give the villagers of Lucas Village a new life as I have earned. I would prefer it to be one where they stand up on their own. I finally truly experienced that she was the main character. Her unyielding goodness and inability to tolerate injustice made me feel that way. "Your Royal Highness, what do you think about this plan?" Christelle turned her gaze to look at the Imperial Prince. The man's thick eyebrows moved slightly. The next morning, the Lucifera Inn of Lucas Village had been extremely busy since the early morning. The Imperial Prince and his envoy were leaving today. The employees knew that they would not get paid this month, yet they still hurried to move the expensive luggage and clean the building. Claudine Green, the innkeeper, always told them that the gifts they received from the esteemed guests were their salary for the month. This was the case even for Claudine's nephew, Morris. She was extremely cold even to her own family members, so they all knew that nothing would change even if they complained. As a result, the employees worked hard today as well. Living as captives of the inn was painful and sad, but it was bearable when thinking about how their neighbors and family members were persisting through with them. "There's too much dust on the carpet. How can His Royal Highness step on such a thing? Go get a new one." "Yes, Miss Claudine." Claudine Green pushed her brows to stop herself from frowning. Every little detail needed to be perfect in order to satisfy such esteemed guests, but these stupid and useless villagers were lacking in all aspects. However, they usually acted like human beings and not animals after she and her father had taught and supervised them for over 10 years. They should be paying her a monthly fee for teaching them, so the fact that they were complaining about her taking 40% of the gifts made her sigh. They were shaking in fear that they would starve to death without Lucifera but didn't want to donate to the inn at all. It was stupid and pathetic. His Royal Highness is on his way. One of the inn employees urgently walked down the stairs and announced. Claudine quickly made sure her hair and her clothes looked fine before motioning toward the employees with her eyes and hands to make them stand in 2 rows. They all made sure to look themselves over to confirm that they looked presentable. There didn't seem to be any issues. They heard heavy footsteps and light footsteps moving at the same time. Step, step, step. Click, click, click. An unbelievably beautiful pair of a man and a woman appeared atop of the new carpet. Claudine Green put on a warm and benign smile on her face the instant she saw the two of them. Her voice turned gentle as well. Your Royal Highness and young Lady Sarnez. I hope that the rest of your journey is smooth. Thank you very much for staying in our Lucifera Inn. She then bowed deeply. Neither responded back to her, but it wasn't shocking that the imperial family or a Père de Royster did not wish to converse unnecessarily with a commoner. She locked her eyes on their backs as they ignored her and headed out the door. Thankfully, the situation she was worried about had not happened. She had been anxious when the imperial prince said he was going to have a luncheon with the village representatives yesterday. Teddy and Marie were people who were, for a lack of better word, respected by the stupid villagers. She was worried that those idiots would say useless things to the imperial prince while she was looking after the ill young countess, but her warning seemed to have worked better than she had expected. After the luncheon, the imperial prince and the young lady spent the evening walking around the backyard of the inn alone. They walked out of the inn linking arms this morning as well. It seemed as if they were too focused on their love lives to pay attention to anything else. It was a good thing for Claudine. It's a good time. What is good? Claudine turned her head in shock. An extremely radiant set of purple eyes were looking down at her. She scolded herself for her mumbling and urgently lowered her gaze. Prince Jesse, thank you for everything the last few days. I am honored, Your Highness. It was an honor to be able to serve the Prince of the Holy Kingdom. No, I was speaking to Morris. The prince gently cut her off. Claudine became anxious and barely held herself back from biting her tongue. Morris, who was across from her, was frantically bowing to the prince. This pain in the ass had been responsible for the prince's room the last 2 days, and she had heard that he was called up to be scolded multiple times. All of the harsh training she had given him up until now was useless. The prince walked out the door with his 2 attendants while she was thinking that she needed to scold Morris severely. The most important part of their stay was about to end without any issues. 3 cheers for His Royal Highness. 3 cheers for His Royal Highness. Thank you very much for your imperial benevolence. All employees of the Lucifera Inn and the villagers of Lucas Village were shouting loudly in the plaza. There were many who were on the ground bowing as well. The imperial carriage envoy that consisted of 10 carriages was slowly turning the corner with their guests on board. Claudine watched the last carriage disappear with satisfaction. It was at that moment. Bang! There was a loud explosion as the Lucifera Inn started burning. TWSB, Chapter 47, Live Twice 5 Crackle. What the? Claudine Green blankly mumbled. The inn that she cherished like a family member and loved like her own child was burning up in flames. It happened so suddenly and was so unbelievable that it felt as if her brain stopped working. Inside, are you sure there is nobody left inside? Morris, calm down. Everybody came out to bid farewell to His Royal Highness. It's okay. She snapped back to reality after hearing a familiar voice. Claudine quickly turned her head. She saw the villagers blankly staring and the inn employees holding Morris back from jumping into the fire. She could also see the children and their guardians who had escaped to the other side of the plaza. The fire-like emotions in her heart finally started roaring. What the hell are you doing? Hurry up and draw some water to put the fire out. Claudine shouted at the top of her lungs. Some people flinched and peeked around at her thunder-like shouting. It was chaotic as some people stepped back while others took a few steps forward. Do you want to see the inn disappear? Are you going to lose all those imperial gifts and tips? Hurry up and move. The woman's wide eyes were full of murderous intent. What she had said made sense. However, it was odd that nobody was doing anything. It felt oddly different from that winter 10 years ago. She stomped her feet in frustration. Morris, stop standing there like an idiot and go draw some water. Auntie, stop harassing your nephew. Someone stepped in front of the young man at that moment. Claudine recognized the person. She was one of those so-called village representatives. Marie, Morris and the rest of us are not going to listen to you anymore. We mean it. Although her voice was shaking, Marie's gaze was firm. Claudine started grinding her teeth. Are you all crazy? Lucas Village is done for if Lucifera is gone. Done for. No, we're not. Our farming is going well and we have grains stored away. Marie calmly responded. Claudine looked as if someone had smacked her in the back as she looked at Marie. She was so angry that acid reflux burned in the back of her throat. It was these people. She was certain these bastards were the ones who lit the inn on fire. You idiots, you fools. You don't know who has fed you and paid for the clothes you are wearing. You bastards are animals, she screeched. She then stomped her way to the well. The people spread like the Red Sea every time she took a step. Blood was dripping from her mouth as she bit down on her lips. Her outraged eyes looked almost crazed. You are even worse than animals. Even the stray dogs have more conscience than all of you. Claudine continued to shout while drawing water. Water splashed on her fancy dress and her shoes became dirty, but she didn't care as she carried the buckets of water. People shuddered in fear of Claudine and their futures. But they clenched their teeth, closed their eyes tightly and held themselves back. They were fine because they were here together. Tomorrow should be fine as well. See what happens if I save the inn. I'm going to be taking 80% of all gifts, splash. Claudine dumped the water on the first floor of the inn. Something unbelievable happened at that moment. The water that she had carried over slowly scattered before it even touched the flame. The drops of water floated in the air before they slowly drifted back toward the well as if they were returning home. The children gasped after experiencing this miracle. What the hell? What the hell is going on? A screech echoed through the plaza. Claudine was huffing as she grabbed the bucket and ran toward the well again. Claudine, stop. She quickly jerked her head toward the person who told her to stop. One of the thorns in her eyes, Teddy, the village representative, was standing in front of the old and weak villagers in the plaza as if to protect them. Shut up. Your father and you have both worked hard for a long time. However, the one you and your father took care of was not us. I said shut up. It was the inn. You took our money away and cherished the inn. What the hell do you know? Claudine's face turned red as she continued shouting. She quickly filled the second bucket and ran toward the inn. She then raised it up to her chest and dumped the water again. Splash. Float, float. Large water drops floated in the air. They still did not reach the fire. Claudine had a blank look on her face as she stumbled. She didn't know what the hell these annoying and terrible villagers had done, but they seemed to have made up their minds to kill the inn. She would not be able to put out the fire like this. She plopped down in front of the inn. Who the hell do you think you are to ignore my father's contributions like this? Exclamation mark. Who do you shitheads think you are? She lamented angrily. Veins were visible on her neck and her eyes were bloodshot. Her red face looked as if it would burst at any moment. Do you know how much my father and I did to expand this inn? A child you raise while harassing another's child is not really raising. It is ruining them. She heard a clear and firm voice at that moment. Claudine and the villagers all turned toward the direction of the voice. Christelle de Sarnez, the young lady in a blue jacket, was standing in the plaza. Crackle. Wow, I heard in advance that this was going to happen, but it was even more amazing seeing it in person. I tightly hugged Demi as I watched the scene in front of me. The red panda stretched out his two front paws and reached for the flames. My goodness, how, it's the will of the Almighty God, the will of the Almighty God. The villagers were mumbling non-stop. The fire around Lucifera instantly disappeared the moment Christelle appeared like a proper main character and delivered a very main character-like line. It seemed more as if the fire had disappeared and less like it had been put out. The flames that disappeared as if they had been a mirage, my goodness. Did not damage the building at all. People couldn't help but gasp. The inn that should have been burnt black was fine with the exception of a few small burn marks. Even the potted plants did not look burnt. I couldn't help but be shocked at this as well. Young Lady Sarnez, why did you buy such a magic tool? A magic tool that explodes without any noise is one thing, but a magic tool for fake flames. It seems like the kind of thing someone would sell or buy with bad intentions. I seriously debated whether the Ligo Central Commerce Center should be left as is. I was concerned that Christelle was trying to start a revolution or something in this second life. That red taste that slowly melts as you bite, TL. Reference to a Red Velvet song https://www. youtube.com/watch v=suf2 inbox closing parenthesis. Oh my, I feel dizzy after suddenly using ether like that. She said something else instead of answering my question. Oh right, there's that thing. Please give me your arm. Christelle smiled and quickly offered her right arm. She had used her ether stealthily from a distance to stop Claudine from pouring water onto the inn. I grabbed her elbow with one arm and started delivering ether through our point of contact. It doesn't seem that serious based on her complexion. Is she the type who doesn't show fatigue much? Good work, young Lady Sarnez. Huh, I suddenly felt as if the ground under my feet suddenly disappeared. I stumbled after feeling the oddly familiar sensation of a lot of ether leaving my body. Someone grabbed the back of my neck at the same time. No, did the ether leave after they grabbed my neck? I anxiously turned around. Your Royal Highness, why the hell is this bastard so pale? Was he scared that Christelle would really destroy the inn? Please let go of me. Why do you grab people by the neck whenever they stumble? The Imperial Prince released my neck as if he was pushing it away. Christelle quickly apologized as well. I'm sorry, Your Highness. I must have absorbed too much ether because I was tired. That's okay, please be careful next time. I gently responded. We had agreed that I would supply ether through physical contact because time was of the essence. It must not have been easy for Christelle to control herself, since she had never used this method before. Hold on, did I just agree to a next time? No, young Countess Nim. We heard someone shout. We turned our heads to see the owner of the voice. The villagers were already looking in that direction. Claudine Green, you will be a prisoner of Her Majesty, Empress Frederick, for insulting the imperial family and stealing the gifts bestowed on the villagers of Lucas Village. That is not true, young Countess Nim. I'm innocent. Claudine looked like a mess while being held up by soldiers. The Imperial Prince had contacted the Lord's castle after yesterday's lunch for some manpower. The soldiers who had been hiding on the outskirts of the village since dawn brought over the convoy carriage and tied Claudine up. Proof? There is no proof. We have proof. Here, this is the fee payment book that your nephew Morris had on him. What did you say? Claudine's eyes opened wide. Vice Captain Elisabeth took a pile of old papers out of her pocket with no signs of a smile on her face. Her gray eyes were as cold as the tip of her sword. This is the record of the past 10 years. We will need to get the handwriting appraised to be sure, but I presume it is yours. That, why is that? Claudine's lips were shaking. The smile she had on instantly disappeared. It was scary. Morris, I told you to burn those immediately. Auntie, what you did was not right. You know that, you damn freeloader. You're going to drag me down until the end. How can you even call yourself family? Claudine spit toward Morris. However, before the spit could reach Morris's face, splash. A large water drop splashed against Claudine's face. Claudine blankly looked forward after being splashed by the cold water and her spit. Miss Claudine, why are you trying to live like your father? Christelle, who had gotten between the two of them, commented in a pitying tone. The inn owner looked at her as water dripped from her hair. I understand that the palm-sized world that your father created is important to you. I also understand that you are used to it, but it is a bit sad that you can't get away from its grasp. You're supposed to be 32. Claudine's voice was shaking. This was probably the first time in her life she heard something like this. I couldn't help but laugh after hearing about what you did to these people at the night market 2 nights ago. People are the same no matter where you go. It also has to do with inheritance. Why are you using your one and only life like that? My father, I hope you can consider this to be a second chance, Miss Green. It's a chance for you to be a new person when you come out of prison. Christelle then turned around without any hesitation. Vice Captain Elisabeth quickly snapped back to her senses and motioned toward the soldiers with her chin. The soldiers placed Claudine on the convoy carriage and prepared to depart for the Lord's castle. The face of the woman who had been the owner of the inn was completely pale. It was the face of someone who had lost everything. The Imperial Guard asked the bystanders to move back and stationed themselves by the Imperial carriage again. Christelle walked toward us. She smiled brightly at the Imperial Prince and I, who were blankly standing there. You want me to go see His Royal Highness with you? Well, if you want me to say it like that, yes, Your Highness. Please do. I blinked a few times. Christelle, who was standing in front of the carriage I was sitting in, was saying something unbelievable. Claudine had been taken away and the villagers were bowing toward us while crying. There was still the problem of running the inn and some political issues, but I couldn't do anything about those. We took care of the big issue without any problem, so I thought that we just had to leave for the Duum March, but the main character apparently had something to say to Imperial Prince Cedric. I understand. I motioned to Benjamin and Gunnell that it was okay before getting off the carriage with Demi around my neck. I would normally have rejected her request and told her to go alone, but Christelle and the Imperial Prince had gotten quite close since we arrived at Lucas Village. It wasn't bad for me since helping them a bit might bring them over that edge to becoming a couple. The two of them had discussed today's plan while walking in the backyard yesterday. Seeing them doing something without me looked so nice. I gave it a 5-star rating. Knock knock. Your Royal Highness, Prince Jesse and young Lady Christelle request an audience. We didn't have to go far since the Imperial Prince's carriage was right in front of mine. As soon as the door opened, his orange eyes glared at me as if he had been waiting for me. Calm down, it's not me. Your Royal Highness. Christelle elegantly bowed. The Imperial Prince finally turned to look at her. Your request. That, ahem. My suggestion. Christelle struggled to speak. I looked at her with an anxious gaze. I wondered if a matchmaker felt like this when setting people up. Thank you very much for listening to my suggestion. You could have immediately sent the innkeeper to prison, but you gave the villagers a chance as I requested. It is my duty to look after Her Majesty's subjects. He responded in a stoic low voice. And today, thank you for working hard in many ways. Christelle emphasized the working hard part. The Imperial Prince then turned to glare at me. Why the heck are you doing that? TWSB, Chapter 48. The Imperial Prince couldn't sleep. 1. Is that all you have to say? Yes, it is, Your Royal Highness. Christelle responded brightly to the Imperial Prince's brusque question. They seemed like two eBay users who completed a deal for a used item. TL, Roz had a Korean eBay but changed so that it is easier for people to understand. This isn't as romantic as I was thinking. Oh well, the two main characters of a romfan probably know better than a #foreveralone like me. Then I shall interrupt you no longer and make my leave, Your Royal Highness. The Imperial Prince lightly motioned with his chin. Christelle quickly bowed and walked away from the carriage. I debated on going back with her before realizing that I needed to see the Imperial Prince too. I confirmed that Christelle was moving away before walking closer to the carriage. I also have something to tell you, Your Royal Highness. He silently raised one eyebrow. This punk really was skilled in body language. I calmly continued speaking. I presume Her Eminence, Cardinal Boutier, has told you about it, but I thought that I should still inform you myself. The Imperial Prince should know that I agreed to cooperate with him. I didn't know whether I would be able to provide any meaningful assistance, but I had said that I would help him win the great clearance of demonic beasts and earn the Sword of Wisdom from the Flaming Star. However, I had never said anything to him. I thought it would be good to use this chance to make my motivations and intentions clear. I peeked toward the Imperial Prince's attendant, David, who was sitting across from him. Will it be okay for David to be here? It is related to Sadie. Cough, cough, cough. David started coughing vehemently. He looked extremely anxious and took a handkerchief out of his pocket before covering his mouth and continuing to cough. David, are you okay? Should I call the Imperial doctor? I was concerned after hearing the middle-aged man gasping for breath. He shook his head and barely managed to get some words out. Cough. I'm choking on spit, cough cough. Please don't cough. You don't need to worry about David since he knows. The imperial prince spoke in a low voice. It made sense that someone who has attended to the imperial prince for so long would know that he had an illegitimate child. I nodded my head and looked left and right. Everybody was busy getting ready to depart, so there happened to be nobody near the imperial prince's carriage right now. My voice became even quieter. I am officially attending the great clearance of demonic beasts as a confessional priest, but I hope that you will get the sword of wisdom, your royal highness. That divine item, I know you will use it for Sadie. He immediately frowned. The imperial prince seemed as if he wanted to say something, but he couldn't easily get any words out, as if he was debating where to start. I felt uncomfortable and asked a question. Am I wrong, your royal highness? Theoretically, you are correct. He answered in a low voice after what felt like an eternity. It's either right or wrong. What the heck does he mean by theoretically correct? I clicked my tongue at his insincere response and said the most important thing. Then I will do whatever I can to help. I hope that your son is not in pain any longer, your royal highness. What did you just? Prince Jesse. I heard a coachman looking for me in the distance. It really seemed to be time to go now. I didn't want the imperial prince to say that we were delayed because of me again, so I bowed and started walking away. I saw that David had his face in his handkerchief, so I was a bit concerned that he wasn't as okay as he said he was. Your highness, I see the lord's castle over there. Squee! Gunnell shouted in a bright voice. Demi was trying to crawl up the window, so I grabbed him by his black belly to give him enough support to look outside. Benjamin turned his head following Gunnell's finger as well. Wow, isn't it very different from the imperial palace, your highness? Marquis Duham's castle is respected for its extremely long history. Benjamin was nice and explained it to me. This view made me gasp in admiration. Marquis Francois Duham's lord's castle boasted a noble and dignified appearance as the subtle fog wrapped around it like a cape. I could see a large mountain peak that looked as sharp as an animal's fang behind the brownish-gray castle. The way the peak was surrounded by clouds made it look like a majestic folding screen. We finally arrived at the Duham March after traveling for 3 days after leaving Lucas Village. The imperial capital is flat, but there are a lot of mountains to the east. Yes, your highness. There is a large mountain range in the direction of the border. Other than the southeastern tip with the river, most of the eastern part of the empire has similar terrain. Benjamin sounded like an experienced travel guide while explaining it to me like that. He looked happy whenever he taught me something, so I always asked him whenever I was curious about things. The sword of wisdom should be stabbed right around there. I guess we can't see it from here because it is too far away. He pointed toward the plains in front of the lord's castle. Plants resembling reeds were fluttering in beat to the wind. I nodded my head and enjoyed the view of the lord's castle as we got closer. I couldn't help but think that it would have been better if Yuns and my brother were here to see it as well. You can rest in the lord's castle until tomorrow, your highness. Marquis Duham is hosting a welcome dinner tonight, but it shouldn't be too big because his royal highness does not like things like that. The great clearance of demonic beasts will start in the morning the day after tomorrow. Gunnell filled me in on the schedule. Since his royal highness was brought up, I frowned slightly as I continued speaking. Hasn't he been a bit weird the last few days? The two of them tilted their heads after hearing my question. Wait, there's no way that I was the only one to feel it. He's normally like this as well, but he seemed overly cold since about 3 days ago. He nagged at the owners of every inn we stayed at, and he is swinging his sword in the yard every night. I'm not sure. Their reactions weren't very confident. I can understand why His Royal Highness would look over the records of other village inns or threaten the owners after what he experienced in Lucas Village. Benjamin calmly responded. I agreed with that aspect. The Claudine Green incident would be something unacceptable for a future emperor. He was probably worried that similar crimes would be happening elsewhere. However, the imperial prince's words and actions did seem much colder. Is the food not to his liking? In addition, Gunnell cautiously answered. His Royal Highness has always been that way, your highness. Now that you mention it, I believe he has been much more relaxed since around the time you entered the imperial palace, your highness. This is him being more relaxed. Benjamin added on after seeing my expression. There were not many people who could even make simple conversation with His Royal Highness. Her Majesty, Her Eminence, Vice Captain Elizabeth and Mr. David were probably the only ones. Even Marquis Duham would calm down in front of His Royal Highness. The less than bi-weekly Royster greater than even gave His Royal Highness a nickname. I think it was the Ice Prince or something. It made me cringe. I presumed it was the work of Lady Belliard since she liked to come up with weird nicknames. Oh, what perfect timing. I see Marquis Duham over there. Benjamin was pointing somewhere. I looked out the window again. There was a man whose light pink eyes were sparkling like cherry blossoms as he elegantly waved his arm to greet us. This guy never changes. I would like to welcome His Royal Highness and all of you once again for coming to my castle. Thank you very much. 3 cheers for His Royal Highness. Cheers. Marquis Francois Duham shouted refreshingly. He picked up his wine glass as thunderous clapping and cheering burst out. The Marquis, who is a master of recreation, was able to keep everyone happy and rowdy even with the silent imperial prince at the center. I've never seen someone like this before. There were not many people at the welcome dinner, as Gunnell had mentioned. There seemed to be about 50 people including all of us in the imperial prince's envoy, the people from the House of Duham, and their confidants. I was sitting at the end of the long VIP table in front of the banquet hall, utilizing my corner seat to overeat. Vice Captain Elizabeth was sitting to my left. Marquis Duham and Christelle were seated at the far right side of the VIP table and were already mixing drinks. They're mixing wine into beer. Basically, it is similar to searching for treasure on the mountain. Vice Captain Elizabeth, demonic beasts are not treasure. However, your score goes up every time you catch one, and you win if you have the highest score. They are pretty much treasures. The Vice Captain of the Imperial Guard smiled brightly and sipped on her sherry. Vice Captain Elizabeth, who was finally able to get off work once we arrived at the march, was drinking while looking as refreshed as she had looked the day after the spring ball. She said that she had not attended the great clearance of demonic beasts ever since she enlisted into the Imperial Guard, but she knew about the rules and methods, as is fitting of a noble of the Empire. You should have seen the large mountain range on your way here. There is a large cave at the lowest peak that we call the Duham Dungeon. This world really has everything. I chewed on a soft piece of roast duck as I waited for her to continue. The duck was juicy and the bigarade sauce was so good. The demonic beasts in the dungeon come out to attack the Lord's castle and the nearby city every year around this time. Barriers are useless because different kinds of demonic beasts come out every year. Some of those bastards definitely manage to escape the castle. That is the reason the competition starts at the mountain but ends on the plains of the Lord's castle. I knew about that as well. There were demonic beasts that managed to escape to get to the Sword of Wisdom from the Flaming Star even with numerous nobles and the imperial family attacking them. Their instincts were making them feel repulsed by the divine item and guide them to attack it. The person who defeats the most demonic beasts is at an advantage, but they generally give extra points to the person who catches the largest and fiercest demonic beast. It is quality over quantity. I see. I responded to her and peeked to the Imperial Prince who was seated to Vice Captain Elizabeth's left. There were no signs whatsoever of a smile on that pretty face. The punk who was usually only generally moody seemed super moody after having come to the south. Do you think that His Royal Highness can win? Of course. Vice Captain Elizabeth responded immediately. It pains me to admit this but Her Majesty is probably the only person who could defeat His Royal Highness in physical strength. His condition doesn't seem good lately. His Royal Highness's condition. Her gray eyes opened wide and she turned to her left. The Imperial Prince felt our gaze and looked back at us. His still sharp gaze made me think that he was nervous from the pressure to win. I couldn't come up with any other reason as to why he had been so sensitive the last few days. I easily ignored the orange gaze and took a sip of orange juice. Look at the little punk acting his age. Asterisk. He thinks that I am my son. Ack. You finally found out. Exclamation mark. Ha 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 ha. Elizabeth screamed and laughed at the same time. She laughed so loud that her voice echoed in the noble reception room before stuffing her face in the couch cushion that David urgently handed her. Marquis Duham might come over wanting to know what was so funny if she was too loud. Elizabeth looked almost as if she was going to cry as she smacked David's arm. The attendant was able to endure her smacks thanks to the toughness he had developed over the years. Mr. David, how did you manage to keep that to yourself? How could you not share such entertaining news? I can honestly say that it was the hardest hurdle of my life, young Countess Nim. Ah, what should I do? Exclamation mark. Prince Jessie, Georges. Cedric called her by her middle name with his voice boiling with rage. It was his way of telling her to control herself, but Elizabeth could not do so and buried her face in the cushion again. She had almost fainted from laughing when Prince Jessie had told her about the misunderstanding, but finding out that the person in question finally heard about it made her want to burst and die from laughter. This was truly too much. Tears finally started dripping out. I told you before. I would rather confess the truth than get this kind of misunderstanding. Why does he not think that we are the same person? What the heck are you saying? Are you saying you want him to find out the truth? Elizabeth was now pointing as she laughed. The imperial prince looked down at his close friend with a complicated gaze. His mind had been quite chaotic for the past 3 days. He didn't know whether he should be angry at Elizabeth who had hidden such a misunderstanding from him or be heartless to the prince who dared to believe that he had an illegitimate child. However, he was the one who had not paid any attention to Elizabeth's hint. He was also the one who had taken advantage of the prince's goodwill. How could it end up being such an unfortunate and dishonest situation? This was no different from when he turned into a child. Ahem, but isn't it understandable? There are many symptoms of ether depletion, but what you have is unique. It's not even mentioned in books. Elizabeth let out some fake coughs before continuing to speak. Furthermore, it's a secret that you use ether. It's understandable why he would think you are different people. In the end, you are saying it is my fault. Hey, hee, sob. The young countess started crying in laughter into the cushion again. The imperial prince let out a quiet sigh. TWSB, Chapter 49. The imperial prince couldn't sleep too. Do you like this lord's castle, your highness? Of course, it is difficult to not like this place. Why are you asking me if you've already made a conclusion? It's amazing. It looks like it came right out of a painting. Ha, I hear that a lot. You have excellent aesthetic senses, your highness. I was currently walking in front of the lord's castle with the already extremely excited Marquis Francois Duham looking for the sword of wisdom from the flaming star. The silvergrass-like plants that filled my view were swaying non-stop. The Marquis was chatting away at full speed as well. There wasn't much behind how I ended up in such a situation. After the welcome banquet last night, I slept in until 10:30 a.m. and was leisurely eating and enjoying my rest when, crew. Alright, Demi, we need to go see your friends. I finally remembered after seeing Demi begging me to hold him. One of the reasons I came here was to see Demi's red panda family, the other 2 divine beasts. I wanted to set up some time for Demi to say hi to them and make sure that they are doing well because it has been a long time. Benjamin and Gunnell were planning to go with me, as expected, but I happened to run into Marquis Duham in the hallway. After that, well, it's pretty obvious as to what happened. Would you please give me the honor? The Marquis said that he was the person who had the most contact with the divine beasts and that he would personally escort me, so I let the 2 tired-looking attendants rest in their rooms. That was how this awkward combination was created. Of course, I was the only one feeling awkward while the Marquis seemed quite excited. Screech. Demi, you shouldn't fool around on top of a horse. Your horse friend is working. Clack, I quickly grabbed Demi, who was trying to crawl onto the horse's head, and held him in my arms. It was my first time riding a horse, but miraculously, Prince Jess's body remembered horsemanship. I avoided being a prince who couldn't even get on a horse at the age of 28. How come he can do things like this but can't throw a dagger? They are putting up the tents, so it would be better to go around this way, your highness. Ah, I understand. The Marquis pointed to the side with dramatic hand gestures. I didn't think that there were many people on the plains when we left the Lord's castle, but I could now see that it was packed with people preparing for the great clearance of demonic beasts tomorrow. I followed the Marquis's guide and moved past the tents. Then, I saw something that made my jaws drop. Are these all seats for spectators? That's right. Are you shocked, Your Highness? I'm sure you are. This competition will be the largest one ever. The Marquis's light pink eyes curled like crescent moons. I couldn't close my jaws while looking at the 10-level bleachers cutting through the plains on both sides. The two sets of seats were facing each other about 100 meters apart and they each seemed at least 300 meters long. Anybody would think that this looked like a large outdoor stadium. The white tents that should block the heat of the May sun seemed to cover not just the top of the seats but also the sides and the back. The area was full of people pulling the cloths taut, hammering stakes into the ground, shouting, and creating circles with their arms. A portion of them bowed after noticing the Marquis and me. I greeted them back and took a look at the mountain range and the stadium. You are herding the demonic beasts that come out of the mountain into the center of the two sides. To be more specific, it is the demonic beasts that pull in the participants. The sword of wisdom from the flaming star is stabbed over there. Marquis Duham pointed toward the middle of the stadium. I could see something black in the distance, sparkling from the warm rays of the sun. My mind blanked out a bit and I moved my horse toward it. Squee. Yes, we're here. Demi must not have been able to hold himself back anymore as he climbed up my chest and sat on top of my shoulders. I held the little punk with one arm and got off the horse after seeing the Marquis get off. I focused my gaze on the grass and walked forward until the divine item appeared. I felt as if I had stopped breathing for a moment. The sword that was nonchalantly stabbed into the dirt was pitch black. It was as if no light could get through it. About half of it was buried in the ground, but the parts one could see were completely clean without even a speck of dust. The hilt and the area under the blade were all black as well, except for the blood-red jewel at the bottom of the hilt. It looked extremely vibrant, as if it had been stabbed in there just yesterday, but it also looked extremely old, as if it was here before anything else. This was the divine sword that had been here for over 1,000 years and never took a master despite countless people trying to pull it out. This was the sword of wisdom from the flaming star. That's a ton of ether. I finally shared my thoughts after a long while. The reason Demi had been chatty since morning and the reason I felt as if I was in front of a large bonfire right now were probably all because of this sword. It wasn't hot or actually making the area warmer, but I could feel the presence of the overwhelming fire attribute ether. It made me think that this was what a divine item was supposed to be like. Even their reason for existence was different from the items humans created and used for convenience. This was the manifestation of the Almighty God's will and ability. All priests say the same thing whenever they see the sword. The Marquis continued speaking almost as if he was humming. Isn't it beautiful? The demonic beasts pass through here at least once to attack the divine item and the participants come down chasing after them. The sword of wisdom could be called the flower of the competition. He then looked to one side of the grass. Demi reacted quicker than I did. Squeal. Cue. Prue. Two red pandas jumped out. The Marquis must have been telling the truth when he said that the divine beasts always stay close to the divine item. Thankfully, both of them looked healthy. Demi was dangling on my right arm so I gently put him down on the ground. I couldn't help but smile after seeing these little guys meet again in this distant march. Crew. Squee. Prue. The three of them were in a ball, rolling on the ground the same way they had been on the day they said goodbye. I was looking at them with concern because I was worried that they would be cut by the sword of wisdom when the Marquis resumed speaking. I heard that you were competing as a team, Your Highness. You are teaming with His Royal Majesty, Vice Captain Elizabeth, and young Lady Christelle. I turned toward him. This is the first time I'm hearing about it. It was an established fact that I was helping the Imperial Prince and that Vice Captain Elizabeth was probably doing the same, but I guess Christelle is in our team too because she is as likable as a side dish that goes well with anything. Of course, it was just a temporary alliance that will end once we return to the Imperial Palace. You're not wrong. I gave an indirect response when he smiled and asked a different question. Do you think that I should trust you, Prince Jesse? What did you just say, Marquis Duham? I asked back. I realized that only his lips were smiling since some point earlier. His light eyes seemed to hold faint traces of suspicion. I didn't know he was capable of such a look. My apologies, Your Highness. I know that His Royal Highness and Her Eminence chose you to be here. However, I have sworn my loyalty to Her Majesty, Empress Frederick. I cannot lower my guard around you until you have Her Majesty's complete trust. The Marquis smiled elegantly with his eyes before lowering his head. It was a gesture to show his apology. I took a long look at him as I organized my thoughts. He was saying that unlike Cardinal Boutier and Imperial Prince Cedric, the Empress did not trust me yet. It was hard enough to accept that the damn Imperial Prince bastard trusted me, but it felt a bit burdensome bringing the Empress into the discussion as well. I had not done anything for the Empress to see me in a good light. It was best for her to not see me in any light. Marquis Duham, you are Her Majesty's close confidant, so I'm sure you know about His Royal Highness's secret. However, I still had no intentions of leaving any suspicion in the Marquis's mind. I was someone who could not make any enemies here. When you say secret, I couldn't ignore a hurting child. My goodness. The adult's relaxed face instantly stiffened. The Marquis raised a hand to cover his mouth while looking at me with his pupils shaking. So this guy does know about it. I am not doing this because I want something from Her Majesty or His Royal Highness. I am simply helping because I wouldn't be at peace. You do not need to think about it with such complication. I didn't expect that you would know about that, Your Highness. My goodness, I somehow ended up finding out. Please do not worry, as I have not shared it with anybody else. The Marquis quickly knelt down on one knee in front of me. I gasped and took a step back. What are you doing, Marquis Duham? People are watching. I understand now. There was a reason His Royal Highness relies on you, Prince Jesse. Who relies on whom? Are we talking about the same Imperial Prince right now? I had no idea that you were helping His Royal Highness with completely pure intentions that don't even have a speck of dust on it. Please forgive me for being such a benighted fool. Wait, wasn't the mood extremely cold like 3 minutes ago? I already knew about this, but why is this guy so extreme? You were saying that you suspected me. I will go to make a confession today. If I am asked about my sin, I will say that when I met with Prince Jesse, I am going to go touch the sword of wisdom while you reflect. Ah, whatever. I left the man who swayed from one extreme to the other and quickly grabbed the sword of wisdom from the flaming star. I was planning on checking it leisurely, but I could not do so because of that guy's silliness. Damn it. Asterisk, but the sword wouldn't come out, so I kicked it. I'm sorry. I see. That was wrong for you to do, Sophie. I answered as gently as possible. I could hear the child on the other side of the wooden window tapping her feet. I barely managed to hold my laughter back as I thought about what to say next. I had heard many confessions until now, but I had never had such a cute little penitent. I was currently fulfilling my duty for coming to the Duham March. My job as the priest was to hear the confessions of the participants for the great clearance of demonic beasts, but my schedule was pushed up half a day with the Marquis opening the Lord's Castle's confessional earlier today. It worked out for me since I was going to be busy tomorrow. But the Marquis, he looked normal, but his brain was not normal at all. Thanks to him, the front of the small confessional was packed since early in the evening. Pretty much every noble who came to the Lord's Castle as a guest were gathered in a line. The person who was currently in the penitent's seat was the soon-to-be 5-year-old Sophie. The girl who would be almost 6 in Korean age said that she came here with her mom, who was participating in the competition. I remember when Yunce was this little. Will I be punished now? It won't be a big punishment. Sophie is still young, so you should get a small punishment. But I don't want even a little punishment. To be honest with you, this uncle tried to grab the sword of wisdom earlier too and it didn't budge. Did you kick it too, Your Highness? No, I couldn't do so because some mister was watching me. The child laughed at my comment. I smiled bitterly. To be more specific, I was not trying to pull the sword out but to make a wish. I prayed to the Almighty God first in case the divine item didn't understand me, and even channeled my ether into it with high hopes. I then tightly held the sword and prayed desperately. I prayed for it to let me go back home. And the results? Well, I'm still here in this body. Yes, there was no way I would be able to go home that easily. Sophie must eat all of her veggies for the whole week. You must also only kick balls outside and make sure that nobody is in the direction you are kicking. That is your penance. Ooh, but bell peppers don't taste good. The child sounded depressed at my stern demeanor. Sophie rustled around for a while and then left the confessional before. Clonk. Goodbye, Your Highness. She urgently opened the door back and respectfully said goodbye. Her mother must have asked if she said goodbye to me. I was half laughing as I responded to the child. The outside sounded quite chaotic right after that. A new guest must have arrived. I thought that I would rest after one more person. Clonk. The door to the other side was slammed open again. I could hear someone's clothes rustling. Sophie. Who is that? A familiar low voice pierced my ears. I anxiously turned toward the window. Your Royal Highness. Did you tell that Sophie person too? What the heck is he talking about? I quickly leaned my body and looked through the wooden window. I could see his orange eyes burning intensely through the tightly woven pattern on the window. His large body was torturing the small chair. I could not understand why this bastard was here right now. Was it for the great clearance of demonic beasts tomorrow? Did you come to make a confession, Your Royal Highness? By the way, did you just cut in line? Even the Marquis knows about it now. Know what, Your Royal Highness? Imperial Prince Cedric kept his mouth shut. Even that 4-year-old Sophie was better at talking. He should confess if he came to confess, and he should speak if he had a complaint, but the Imperial Prince was acting exactly like his son. This was clearly an obstruction of business. TWSB, Chapter 50, In the Empire, the Demonic Beasts, 1. So what did you do, Prince Jesse? I was honest with him. I told him to please leave if he was going to continue not saying anything. PFF'd. Vice Captain Elizabeth quickly took out a handkerchief to cover her face. Her condition seemed very good since morning, as she would smile brightly or laugh like this at everything I said. I slowly petted Demi's back as he pushed against my thighs. Marquis Francois Duham was in the front of the platform giving the opening speech to start the great clearance of demonic beasts. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, visitors of all ages, gender, and status. May your noble souls, full of spirit, that led you to the clearance. Did His Royal Highness leave when you said that? Christelle quietly asked from my right. I nodded my head. He must really not have needed anything. He barged out as quickly as he barged in. I later saw that the door to the confessional was half falling off. Oh my, he messed with someone else's bread and butter because he was upset. Vice Captain Elizabeth quietly chuckled at Christelle's comment. We were in the VIP section at the back of the platform with Imperial Prince Cedric sitting at the highest seat, looking as stoic as a sculpture. I didn't know how his condition was, but Vice Captain Elizabeth told me multiple times that it was pretty much a guarantee that the Imperial Prince would win. For our esteemed guests, who have come to give endless encouragement and support to our participants, as well as my dearly beloved residents of our march. Welcome. Marquis Duham made his final comments at that point, and, woo. 3 cheers for His Royal Highness. Victory, 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 victory. Extremely loud cheering burst out, making my ears go numb. Christelle and Vice Captain Elizabeth sat up straight and made sure to pay close attention to their facial expressions. I had already gasped 6 times today, as this was the first crowd of this size that I had seen since I transmigrated into this world. There were a lot of people in the imperial capital, but there were never thousands of excited people gathered in one place like this. What I saw at the Ligo Central Commerce Center was nothing compared to this. The fervor I felt from this crowd was like the passion visible in any Korea versus Japan sports matches. Duham, 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 united, we stand, divided, we fall. Chants that I had no idea about echoed through the plains. The heat of excitement shot up to the clear May sky. The stands were full of color with people who brought posters the size of large doors, bouquets of flowers, and towels. There was so much energy that even I, someone who was only planning on making sure that Demi and I were safe until the end, was getting excited. Your Royal Highness and our esteemed VIPs. Please head down this way. Marquis Duham, who had come to the back of the platform at some point, was elegantly pointing to the stairs. The Imperial Prince got up first and moved with his guards around him. I walked with Christelle in front of me, and looked around without making it seem obvious. Long live the Ryester Empire. Hooray! Hooray! 3 cheers for His Royal Highness. Hooray! The 2 rows of spectators were split with nobles on the left and commoners on the right, but both sides were packed to the point that many people were standing. The cheering from the commoners' side was generally louder and coarser in word choice, but it was surprising that the nobles weren't far behind. The swordsmen and mages were mostly of noble birth, so their family and close friends seemed to be used to this kind of atmosphere. There were many people already drinking and shouting as well. Over there, please head to the portal at the center. The Marquis's long finger was pointed toward the center of the stadium. The spectators, who were seated on both sides of the approximately 100 meters plane, cheered even louder after seeing us. I confirmed that the portal motion sickness medicine I placed this morning was still there. Around 100 temporary portals had been placed overnight for the competition. The other participants were all already standing by their portals. Us arriving at the center portal would end the opening ceremony. The participants have finished their preparations. Wah! The Marquis spoke into a long magic device that made his voice echo throughout the stadium. I wondered if it was okay for someone as high in status as a Marquis to be the MC, but I didn't think that this guy would allow someone else to do such a fun job. We meet again. Ha 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 ha. Christelle made a joke after entering the portal and Vice Captain Elisabeth laughed out loud. As mentioned before, the 2 of them, Demi, the Imperial Prince, and I were in one team. It was both laughable and unbelievable that people who had never coordinated with each other before were gathered together like this. Well, at least nobody should die. Your Highness, here is your bag. Benjamin and Gunnell, who had been seated on the first row of the nobles section, hurried over and handed me some supplies. It was a leather bag full of simple foods, water, some medicine and other things. I put the straps over my chest and held the bag on my back. I looked around to see that the others were using this moment to check their weapons and food. Thank you very much. Please don't worry. I promise I will return safely. Yes, Your Highness. I will be praying for you. It's the demonic beasts that have to worry. Good luck, Your Highness. The 2 of them warmly cheered me on. I smiled and looked down at Demi. Demi, are you sure you don't want to get off? It'll be dangerous, so you don't have to go with me. Crew. The red panda gently bit down on my shoulder. His black bean-like eyes were full of discontent. Okay, I'll stop with the nonsense. I rubbed between his ears. Gunnell and Benjamin returned to their seats. Okay, activate the portals, Rumble. I heard what sounded like thunder from the mountains that cut the Marquis off. The ground then shook as if there was an earthquake. I even saw some participants stumble and fall. The spectators looked anxious and excited. There is the first mountain rumbling. The prophecy was accurate. The charge of the demonic beast nears. Marquis Duham shouted in an even louder voice. Woo! Kill! 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 The stands felt like Spartans right before they departed for war. I gulped and tried to remember the information that I crammed into my head. The mountain rumbling was a precursor that happened before the start of the great clearance of demonic beasts, before the demonic beasts started coming out of the dungeon. There were usually 3 mountain rumblings before the demonic beasts appeared, and it was best for the participants to climb the mountain, set up, and prepare for battle before that happened. The part about the prophecy being accurate was referring to how the mage who predicted that the demonic beasts would appear today was correct. Do we not need to come up with a strategy? I opened my mouth. Mages were advancing toward the portal to channel their mana. We would instantly be teleported to a random part of the mountain, so I thought it would be best to discuss something in advance. Christelle and Vice Captain Elisabeth looked at me with serious gazes. Even if it is just simple things about how to handle monsters of different attributes. Are you scared? A low voice pierced through my ears. I looked up at the sun-like orange eyes on the other side. The first thing he said to me after disappearing like that yesterday was a provocation. No, Your Royal Highness. I'm actually a stronger priest than I may seem. I simply asked because I think that there might be someone in our group who cannot even say what they need to say. Kahahehe. Vice Captain Elisabeth's face scrunched up in laughter again. The Imperial Prince slightly frowned. Then I guess there is nothing to worry about. Rumble. The second mountain rumbling shook the stadium and the stands. Thousands of whispers rippled through the crowd like waves. I looked around and saw that about half of the participants had already taken the portals and teleported to the mountain. A young mage behind me was peeking at me, looking as if he didn't know what to do. I guess this person will not have to work today. Why, Your Royal Highness. I will now channel mana into the porta, no need. It's okay, sir. Please go get some rest. Excuse me. But, the mage's eyes opened wide at what the Imperial Prince and I said. The Imperial Prince bastard scattered his red and marvelous red mana without any warning. The small portal instantly fired up like a piece of metal thrown into a furnace. Ong! Screech! Sorry Demi. The ride isn't so good, is it? I whispered loud enough for the others to hear while watching the red panda bury himself into my chest. Everything soon turned white. Asterisk, there's nothing here yet. The first thing I heard was Christelle's clear voice. She was carefully taking a step with a blue whip in her hand when I opened my eyes. The ground looked easy to slip on because there were many mossy pebbles. I carefully put Demi down and looked around. I could see a slightly sloping ground, a wide stream, boulders both large and small, and the shade created by trees. A cool breeze was blowing from the top of the mountain. We had been teleported to the valley. It'll make things easier for me because there is a lot of water. I see, young lady Christelle. Please take good care of me. Vice Captain Elisabeth responded cheerfully as she pulled out her sword. It truly was an advantageous situation for Christelle. She was extremely adaptable and didn't need to worry about ether because I was here. Being on a slope was a disadvantage, but it shouldn't be an issue for the two sword users. Rumble. The third and final mountain rumbling slammed against my ears at that moment. It was extremely loud and fierce, incomparable to what we had heard down in the plains. I frowned out of instinct and tried to maintain my balance. The water from the valley splashed out in all directions and wet our boots while rocks and dust shot up as if they were dancing. The rumbling finally stopped when the intense shaking got so bad it almost made my head rock. Vice Captain Elisabeth gently shook her head. What a noisy way to start. They're coming. Sighing, I released my holy domain as the Imperial Prince mumbled. I couldn't detect the demonic beasts, but I knew that the demonic beasts started their first charge after the third mountain rumbling because I had read about it. Demi raised his tail and opened his mouth. Everybody please stand inside the circle for now. Yes sir. Flutter. CAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAA Vice Captain Elisabeth quickly stepped forward as our vanguard. Slash. Ba-bang. Her sword cut through the air without any hesitation. The sword aura that shot out so quickly that I couldn't even see it took care of tens of demonic beasts the size of my forearm in an instant. Monsters that resembled bats quickly plopped down on the ground. Something is weird. Vice Captain Elisabeth frowned while shaking her sword. I immediately understood what she meant. It was because CAAAAAAAAAAAAW. Flutter. They were all rushing past us. They didn't even care that some of them had died. None of the seemingly endless number of demonic beasts flying toward us showed us any attention. The way they were rushing to the bottom of the mountain seemed as if they are running away. I quietly mumbled. 4 pairs of eyes quickly exchanged glances. Boom. The ground shook again. But this was different. This was not a mountain rumbling, it was something heavy taking a step. For example, boom. It reminded me of the noise from less than Jurassic Park greater than. Damn it. Boom. Screech. Demi screeched and stood up on his hind legs. Thick thorny vines appeared around him. I created multiple ether orbs on top of my palm. Christelle was already creating thick strands of water in front of us when we made eye contact. Boom. Clang. The Imperial Prince pulled his sword out with his left hand. I couldn't believe that I was using this time to figure out that he was left-handed. Crunch. Crack. I could hear the noises of trees nearby bending and being crushed. The enemy was right in front of us. A Venus flytrap the size of a pot lid started growing from Demi's vines. I tried to do whatever I could to increase the range of my holy domain, but 30 meters was still as far as I could go. Damn bishop level power. Boom. Ruar. I heard a piercing roar before the bastard smashed through the forest and showed itself. 3 people's jaws dropped on their own. What stood in front of us had a yellow body that was as tall as a 4-story apartment building. It had yellow, bloodshot eyes that were blinking vertically. Its thick hind legs and dangerous tail looked as if they could break my bones even with a gentle brush against me. Its terrifying cone-shaped teeth and short legs finished this anomaly that I would never be able to forget. Something was wrong. Is that a tyrant electric dragon? Christelle was blankly mumbling when the imperial prince sternly commented. It's the beast that served as the sacrifice for Her Majesty's victory. Your mother caught this golden T-Rex by herself. That doesn't make any sense, Your Royal Highness. This kind of demonic beast is only supposed to come out once every 200 years. How could it show up again after just 2? Vice Captain Elizabeth's eyes were shaking violently. The imperial prince did not respond. There was no way to push a demonic beast back once it escaped the dungeon. It'll be bad to use water because it is an electric monster. He looked back at the three of us. No, he was looking at me. We need a strategy. Boom. Ruar. The T-Rex, no the tyrant electric dragon, started moving. I felt as if my brain was sweating. My mouth shared what was probably a typical sentiment for a Korean person in such a crazy situation. Do you really think this is the time for that, you crazy bastard?